And that is the awesome Kellyanne Blazek, who runs our rural work here at the Domestic Policy Council. I am Neera Tandon. I am the chair of the Domestic Policy Council, and I'm really excited to kick off this Rural Communities in Action event here today at the White House. I really want to welcome all of you here. Really grateful for all you're doing, and today is all about highlighting and celebrating the Biden-Harris administration's investments in rural America and rural communities and all the work we've accomplished together. There really is so much that has been done, and this is a great opportunity for us to highlight not what's in motion today, but what's been in motion for years. As chair of the White House Domestic Policy Council, I have the great honor of working on a range of domestic policy issues for the president, from healthcare to housing to education to workforce development. And all of those issues come together in our rural portfolio itself, working alongside Secretary Vilsack, an amazing leader, to make sure we're delivering for rural America. The president is driven by a very simple principle when it comes to rural America, and that is that we have to make sure that people should have opportunity where they are. The president believes no one should have to leave home to find opportunity. That we have, oh good, thanks, yes, thank you. I always like to encourage the clapping. The president really has made a bet on America and on our rural communities, and really on the idea that despite decades of trickle-down economics, or decades where we really thought the economy will grow elsewhere and it'll trickle down to rural America, that is wrong, and it is not working. And that is why he believes in an economy that grows from the middle out and the bottom up. The president's economic agenda is creating jobs and opportunities in rural America, and really, I have to say, we are focused like a laser beam on ensuring that our investments, the investments we're making from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, from the Inflation Reduction Act, and the CHIPS Act, that those investments are not just in urban or suburban America, but those investments are reaching all corners of the country, including and especially rural America. And just one issue here is why we think these investments are so important is because we know too many families in small towns across the country have had to sit around their kitchen table and really have hard conversations about whether their kids can stay in their community, the community they love and have grown up in. And we believe it's just wrong that too many times in those conversations, families have to say, you have to leave in order to get opportunity. So that's why we believe these investments are critical, so that those family conversations can be the ones that are positive, and that where people really do believe in their hearts that they can find opportunity much closer to home. So that's why we've been investing, and we have a broad agenda. Rural America is very diverse. It's not one size fits all. There's a very broad agenda. So we've been focused on delivering on health care, and for example, rural seniors are seeing lower drug costs thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act. About 281,000 rural Part D Medicare enrollees have already benefited from the $35 insulin cap. Last month, the Department of Labor announced the availability of $44 million for the 5th round of Workforce Opportunity for Rural Communities grants, which provides grant funds for communities to develop local and regional workforce development solutions. And today, USDA is announcing over $670 million to support 47 rural infrastructure projects across the country, as well as the availability of $1 million for disaster assistance funds, which I will let the Secretary talk more about. These investments are long overdue, but we know that sustainable economic growth is only successful if it starts from the ground up. And that is why we launched in the Biden-Harris administration the Rural Partners Network. This is a network that we've developed at the Domestic Policy Council, really working very closely with the U.S. Department of Agriculture to lead what we call RPN. We understand that it can be very challenging to access federal funds. That federal funds come in a wide variety of forms with a lot of different requirements. So the real idea of this is to ensure that we're putting the federal government at your doorstep. RPN staff are currently on the ground supporting 36 rural and tribal communities in 10 states and Puerto Rico, and we're eager to expand RPN to more states, and the President's FYI 25 budget allows us to do that. We've identified rural desk officers at over 20 federal agencies and regional commissions who are focused on supporting RPN communities. And what that really means is making it as easy as possible for you to access, RPN communities to access funds. Since RPN launched in 2022, the federal government has invested nearly $3 billion in RPN communities. And behind all these numbers and projects are really people, stories of people's lives transformed by investments that can really make all the difference. Extraordinary people like all of you who are taking action and making a positive impact on their rural communities. And today we're excited to announce a new Rural Innovators Initiative to recognize Americans who are ensuring rural communities thrive for generations to come. The administration invites the public to nominate rural innovators in your communities. The mayors of your town, teachers, healthcare leaders, a young person, selected individuals will be recognized later this year. You can go to rural.gov to nominate a rural innovator, and the nomination form will be open next month. This is really all of our, just really part of our strategy to highlight and invest in not just projects, but people in rural communities. And we believe that when we are successful in rural communities, the whole country will be successful as well. And fundamentally, I'll close with this, which is, sometimes we have, in the halls of Washington, it can feel like we are talking about certain groups of people and not others, and that we're not really focused on the needs of all of our communities. And I have to say, I have the great privilege of working for the president, and he really instills that it's vital that we don't lose the voices of rural communities in the halls of Washington, that your voices, your lives are front and center in our policy, and that we have to ensure that we're an administration that it serves everyone, not just some of us, but all of us. And so we're working to ensure that everyone, no matter your geography or what kind of community you live in, has opportunity to realize the promise of America. And in that work, there is no greater leader than Secretary Vilsack, who I am very privileged to work with. And I've known him for a very long time, and he is a fierce advocate for rural America and ensuring that this administration really lives up to its words by investing in rural America, just as we invest in all Americans. Secretary Vilsack?
Good morning. Thanks, folks. Thank you very much. Thank you. Neera, thanks very much for that kind introduction. It's great to be with all of you today. So the way this works, your staff gives you a brief, and it tells you you're supposed to make an announcement. But then Neera already made the announcement. So I'm going to give you a little more detail about it, but then I'm going to actually challenge all of you today to think a little bit differently about rural development and rural economic opportunity as we see it in the Biden-Harris administration. Indeed, we are announcing $671.4 million of resources in 47 projects across 23 states. It's primarily in two categories. Water and wastewater disposal systems. We know how important and significant that is. I was mayor of a small town for 5 years. I became mayor in part because our mayor was murdered by a citizen who was upset over the fact that the sewer system in our town did not work. He had raw sewage come up into his basement every time it rained, and he took matters into his own hands, tragically. So I understand and appreciate the significance of this. So when we invest $118.5 million in 37 projects, I know that that creates the opportunity for a more stable and secure community, and I think it creates the opportunity to expand economic opportunity because you have the infrastructure to support new job opportunities. We're also investing $552.9 million in electric infrastructure. Reliable electricity, obviously critically important to the quality of life and the economic opportunity in small communities. 10 projects will receive the benefit of those resources, and it's a combination of grants and loans that we put forward. I'm glad that Neera introduced the notion of the Rural Partnership Network. Here's the reality. There are a lot of communities in the country that understand and appreciate how to play this game and have applied successfully for programs like the ones I just announced. But there are also places of extreme and persistent poverty that have not been successful, do not understand and appreciate what they need to do to be able to get resources, and have often felt left out and left behind. This administration has made a serious commitment to those areas of persistent poverty, and the Rural Partnership Network is one way we are doing that, by essentially putting people on the ground in those 36 communities across the United States, those 10 states, and Puerto Rico. People that are actually living, working, and focused on that particular area, working with community leaders to identify projects, and then working through the rural desk officers in all of the domestic focused departments of government to make sure that they succeed. And here's the news. The $1 million that's going to Puerto Rico is designed in part to pay for and to encourage financial and technical assistance so that communities within Puerto Rico will be able to understand and appreciate how to access the various programs that we have at USDA, the Department of Transportation may have, EPA may have, the domestic operations. It's going to, I think, help focus on about 15 projects and 15 grants. It may be a housing program. It may be a community facility opportunity that communities are interested in. The application period for this $1 billion in Puerto Rico starts May 14th and ends on June 28th. So this is just an example of how we're trying to provide the resources on the ground to make a difference. Now here's the news. And this is, I think, really, really important. When I talk about a persistently poor area, I'm talking about a county or an area of this country where the poverty rate has been over 20% for 30 years or more, consistently and consecutively. You all know where those places are. Maybe some of you come from some of those places. We have a rural economy at a glance document that we put out every year at USDA, in which we sort of determine what the economic health of rural places might be. For the first time in quite a while, this year's edition of the Rural Economy at a Glance indicated that 52 counties out of roughly 260 counties who have been designated as persistently poor, again, 20% poverty for 30 years or more, are now out of that category. And for the first time in quite a while, the rural economy has started to grow. That's also something worth a clap or two. And the challenge, of course, is to keep the momentum, to keep building on this. And you'll be hearing from a great champion of rural America, Chairwoman Debbie Stabenow, who is leading the effort in the Senate to create the next iteration of our Farm Bill. And she will talk, no doubt, about the importance of some of these programs, the Reconnect program, which is broadband, the opportunity for RPN to be sort of formalized into law so that we continue to do this. It's not just one administration who comes up with this. It's every administration that needs to do it. No doubt we'll mention the need for us to continue to invest in healthcare access and also housing, which is a critical issue. Now, all of that's great. And all of you are here as champions, I suspect, for one or more of those areas. The problem with our thinking about this is that we're losing sight of what we really need to focus on. If you want to build quality of life, if you want to grow the economy in a place where 15% of America's population lives and represents 75% of the land mass of the United States, if you want to give those families at that coffee table that Neera talked about the opportunity to make the case that their children and grandchildren can in fact stay and prosper, you got to focus on creating economic opportunity. It's all well and good to talk about infrastructure, it's all well and good to talk about housing, but those are essentially results of an area that either has or doesn't have proper economic development. And one of the key problems has been the way in which we deal with agriculture in this country. In the 1970s, we made the decision as a country to move away from a supply management system of agriculture where farmers did pretty well and small and mid-sized farming operations could stay in business, to a different model, a model that basically encouraged farmers to plant fence row to fence row, produce as much as you possibly can. Well, the problem with that theory and that approach is that it encourages larger and larger and larger farming operations, which means that you have fewer and fewer and fewer farming operations, which means that you have fewer and fewer farm families, which means you have fewer and fewer children in your schools, so they have to merge. You have fewer customers in your small town businesses that are owned and operated by folks who live, work, and raise their families there. You have fewer patients at the hospital, so you don't have a hospital, you got a clinic. I want you to know that since 1981, when Bob Bergland, who was a Secretary of Agriculture for Minnesota, raised concerns about this, we've lost 544,970 farms. Now, to give you a sense of how many farms that is, that's every farm today in North Dakota and South Dakota, and in Minnesota and Wisconsin, and in Illinois and Iowa, and in Nebraska and Colorado, and in Missouri and Oklahoma. We lost 151 million acres of land that was in farming that's no longer in farming today. It's concreted over. That's the landmass of Florida and Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Maryland, and most of Virginia. So if you want to know why we've had a challenge affording housing and having access to health care, or being able to have decent water systems, or economic opportunity, it's because we haven't created an environment in which small and mid-sized farming operations can survive and thrive in addition to large-scale production agriculture, until now. This administration understood this, and because of the infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act and creative use of the tools that we have at USDA, we have created an entrepreneurial opportunity. And before you leave here today, you're going to get one of these that sort of outlines the details of this. But essentially, it's two components. It's climate-smart agriculture and it's local and regional food systems. It's climate-smart agriculture paying farmers to embrace climate-smart practices, allowing them to measure and monitor the climate result and get paid for it in terms of value-added proposition for their products, and also get paid by those who need offsets for their own carbon footprint, paying farmers to sequester carbon. It's a new commodity. It's the conversion of agricultural waste into a new industry called sustainable aviation fuel, which is a brand new commodity, one of 40,000 products that can be made from agricultural waste that was a problem and now can become a commodity and a new economic opportunity and a job creator in rural places. It's about renewable energy that creates not the opportunity just for the farmer to reduce their energy costs, but to pool excess energy that they're able to create with other farmers and allow their REC, or the local municipal utility, to embrace renewable energy with resources under the Inflation Reduction Act and create an energy economy. Now, instead of just one income source, this farm family now has 4 or 5 new income sources. And if you have a local and regional food system that pays that farmer a better deal, you go to the grocery store and you put your dollar on the counter, farmer gets about 20 cents on average of that food dollar. When you buy something at a local and regional food opportunity, a farmer's market or a farm-to-school program, that farmer gets 50 to 75 cents of every food dollar. It's a better deal. And now there are nearly $20 billion being invested in this new system. And you all can be supporters of and advocates for this system in your communities, in your counties, in your cities, in your states, in your region. You can essentially say there is no reason why we have to lose 544,970 farms in a lifetime. There's no reason for that conversation to take place at that coffee table. It can be a different conversation. if we all basically understand the power of this idea of creating multiple streams of income for that farm family that in turn creates an entire supply chain for that sustainable aviation fuel, for those ecosystem service markets, for that renewable energy, for that local and regional food system, it also creates jobs. Now you've got people, and people can support schools, and people can support Main Street businesses, and people can support healthcare. That's the president's vision. I'm excited about this because it's working. And we need to make sure that we got people out there talking about this so that there's an awareness and appreciation for it. Now, Debbie Stabenow's Farm Bill basically supports many of the programs that we have instituted in this new vision. So if you want more details about this after you've seen it, our YouTube channel at USDA can give you a little whiteboard presentation. You can see me talk over and over and over again. There's the 3-minute version, and then there's the long 12-minute version. The point of this is, the point, frankly, is this, and I'll finish with this. Here's why this is really important. Beyond the obvious, beyond the fact that these people who live, work, and raise their families in rural communities are good people and they deserve economic opportunity, beyond the fact that it's 75% of the land mass of the United States and we need to take better use of it, beyond the fact that we want these small communities to thrive, it's about national security. Because the reality is that a disproportionate number of young people go into the military from those small towns. A disproportionate number, in some cases twice the percentage. In other words, if it's 15% of America's population, it could be 30% of our military. If we continue to squeeze and continue to move people off the farm and out of those small towns, you're squeezing the population of people willing to serve our country. It's an important opportunity for us. It's a unique opportunity. And I think this is an administration who literally has invested in over 10,000 investments in this system that I just talked about. I'm not exaggerating. Over 10,000. You say, well, where are they? Every place you see a shovel in the ground, every place you see a piece of equipment creating a new road or putting broadband in, that's all of this. Everywhere you see farmers embracing climate-smart agriculture, that's all of this. Everywhere you see your rural utilities saying it's time to transition and embrace renewable sources, that's this. Every time you see a farm-to-school program, a farmer's market, an opportunity for your local grocery store to advocate for local producers or your local restaurant purchasing, that's what this is. It's everywhere. And we just need to make sure people are aware of it. All right? That's your job. That's your challenge. You take this word and you start spreading it. Because if you do, I can guarantee you the persistent poverty count will come down. I can guarantee you the population will increase. I can guarantee you that we can bring prosperity back to rural places. And I can guarantee you that we'll always have enough young men and women willing to protect us. All right, thank you very much. I'll take questions.
Secretary Vilsack, thank you so much for having us here. I'm Glenn Prickett with Gulf of Maine Research Institute. You honored us with a visit in January in Maine after some terrible storms, hurt hardworking farmers and fishermen all across our state, so I want to thank you again for your visit. At Gulf of Maine Research Institute, we're following your advice to help coastal communities focus on economic development. For us, it's fishing, not farming, but it's the same principle, and we're trying to bring diverse revenue streams into coastal communities to support the hardworking people there. I'm curious, one of the challenges we have is how do we engage value chains to leverage the investments that your administration, the President's administration, is making? So we've put over $6 million of federal funds to work in coastal communities. We're very grateful for that, about a third of that from USDA Rural Development, so thank you. One of our challenges, how do we leverage that with private sector value chains to get more of those revenue streams flowing? So could you say a word about how your department and we can work more with the private sector
Yes.
in these issues?
I would say two things. First of all, the climate-smart agriculture concept applied to fisheries works something like this. We incent farmers to embrace climate-smart practices And then we act with our partners to create a market opportunity where they will be paid a value-added increase. We recently just launched our first commercial product with this system. It's rice. It was raised in Louisiana and in Arkansas. Half the water, half the methane. Now, Columbia Brand has purchased the first 50 million pounds of this rice and is now basically marketing it as climate smart long rice. So the first thing is to basically say, work with us to identify how whatever you're doing is unique and different, and then allow us to essentially work with you to inform the market that you've got something that is a little bit different, produced a little bit differently, produced with sensitivity to climate, and that it creates an opportunity and a market opportunity for the private sector. The second piece of this is we understand the power of procurement. We spend a lot of money at USDA investing in food for food banks and for schools. And we've created what are called local food purchasing agreements. So it's part of this, all right? We're basically saying we give you money, and we don't want you just simply to go out and get the cheapest product that gets shipped 1,000 miles and then gets to your food bank or your school. You have a responsibility to reinvest a portion of this in your local community. So we want to create the value chain between the market and the local producer. So these local purchasing agreements, and by the way, we are purchasing, fish. We're seeing an increase in interest and need for fish. So I would say tapping into, through Maine's local food purchasing agreement, and actually also accessing every state. We gave the ag secretaries and commissioners in every state literally millions of dollars to help support the supply chain that will make it a little bit easier and less expensive to create those value-added opportunities with cold storage, refrigeration, and things of that nature. So there may be an opportunity there to tap into that. That also creates an opportunity through the supplier of the various refrigeration units and so forth to create that connection. So utilizing the procurement opportunity, utilizing the climate smart model, and working with us and state officials to make sure that we know how unique your products are, so we in turn can help. I'm not in charge of the mic, so. Thank you.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
My name is Robert Van Zyl. I'm the tribal chairman of the Secaucus Chippewa tribe in the state of Wisconsin. I live in northern Wisconsin, and it's a very rural place. The nearest city is 35 miles away from us. We live nestled in the National Forest. And the question that I have for you, sir, is from what you're saying to me is housing, broadband, education. When we found out from the pandemic, them are the things that we found out that was very serious, important keys in our community and how it addressed us, because there was a high side with regards to the pandemic, but also understanding the low side. And what we're trying to do is raise that back up. And we are looking at working with our towns, our cities, our counties, our municipalities, working in rural America and wanting to grow our community. We're a sovereign community, but that might be the only thing that's different between us and the people that live there. And what you're saying to me, sir, is we need to grow our police force. We need to grow our police departments, fire stations, ambulance, rescue squads. Those are the things that I'm coming here for, to talk to you about rural America. And I appreciate what you're saying about broadband, because broadband is something that we found out. We was trying to educate our children when all of our children were sent home and they weren't able to go to school. Oh, go online. How can you go online when you don't have broadband or you don't have anything? So now we're finding out today that we need broadband. We need that fiber optics. We need to develop that stuff and create it and get to modern day society. And that's what I wanted to say to you, sir.
A couple of things. This administration has made an absolute historic investment in broadband expansion. We've done 330 projects investing $3.9 billion in rural communities across the United States. That is a down payment on the nearly $63 billion that the Department of Commerce and the FCC has under the infrastructure law that is being distributed to states to essentially fill in the gaps so that by the time these resources are invested, it will take a year or two to do this, but by the time those resources are invested, the goal is that there not be a place in the United States, no matter how remote, that doesn't have access to decent broadband.
One more thing, sir. I just wanted to mention this as my grants person here is bumping me in the back saying, don't forget the environmental part. One of the things that we're trying to do, sir, is create alternative energy by using the hemp and trying to grow the hemp where farmers could get a subsidy other than letting the field just grow by itself. If we can return that energy back into the environment, potato farmers, green, peas, all of those things would have a change. You could grow the hemp, and next year you'd be growing it would renew the ground and all of this, and I think you can have a very positive thing. And I know I'm kind of yapping, but I'm gonna quit talking, but I totally understand what you're doing, sir, and I very much appreciate you. Thank you.
We are doing everything we can to encourage thoughtful hemp production. There are multiple uses of it in addition to the ones you've mentioned. It can also potentially be a feedstock for many of those 40,000 bioproducts that I mentioned earlier. I mean, this is an opportunity for rural America to accelerate and catapult the president's vision. We are engaged, every single generation is engaged in a competitive competition with the entire world for economic opportunity. Every generation of Americans has been involved in this. And every single time, we've been able to win that competition because we've been the innovator. We've been the folks who have figured out the unfigureoutable, okay? We're the folks who understand and appreciate that there are ways in which we can create a climate-smart future that actually expands economic opportunity and improves the environment. We're going to be the country that figures this out. We're going to be the country that gets to sustainable aviation fuel first. Now, just this one issue. This is one industry. It's 36 billion gallons, which is 2.5 times the size of the current, or almost more than 2 times, the size of the current biofuel industry. The current biofuel industry represents and supports 400,000 jobs. So do the math. That's one product, 1 million jobs, and new market opportunities. Because the reality is, as good as the electric vehicle thing is, you're not going to have an electrically powered, battery-powered plane. Because what do you do when the battery wears out and you're flying over one of those Great Lakes or an ocean? No place to go. All right? So rural America has this extraordinary opportunity to just turn everything upside down and create a compelling argument to young people. Not only can you have economic opportunity, you could change the world. You can lead the world with what you do in that small town. I mean, I've been working on this stuff for 40 years. This is the best opportunity I've ever seen in my lifetime. But it's a choice. It's a choice. You can choose to do it the way we've done it for the last 40 years and continue to lose 544,970 farms. My predecessor basically said, well, you either got to get big or get out. No. You get entrepreneurial. You create additional revenue streams. You create additional opportunity. And you send the message that every place in America is a place of opportunity, not just a few cities. That's the challenge. And you now have the tools. All that I'm talking about, everything I'm talking about, has been funded for the next 3 to 5 years. This is the opportunity of a lifetime. Now it's up to you to make full advantage of it. You're going to get one of these. And here's a champion right here. She's going to make sure you got a farm bill that allows you to continue to do that. Thank you all. I said, Senator, I did already pump you up quite a bit, but I've said this in public forums before, and I'll say it again. In my experience as a small town mayor, as a state senator, as a governor, and as secretary several times, I've had an opportunity to deal with a lot of people in the legislative branches of government. Most effective person I have ever seen. That's the only way I can introduce this woman, Debbie Stabenow.
Well, good morning. Don't you wish the secretary would just be a little more enthusiastic? You know, he and I like mind meld on so many things. I am so glad that you were here. I do have to tell you, though, that as a state that like grows a lot of biofuels and makes electric vehicles, I like both. And so we need sustainable aviation fuel. And then we also, and I'm excited, I'm going to be with the president in just a couple of hours announcing some policies that relate to making sure we have a level playing field with China as we look at clean energy manufacturing, EVs, which is so very important. So I am really glad to be here. Where's Neera? I don't know if she had to leave. Neera Tandon is awesome, and thank you. And our HHS Deputy Secretary, Andrea Palm. Wait, I'm looking, okay, am I seeing? Oh, right here, okay, great to see you. And also from Michigan, Sarah Lucas. I was looking for Sarah, there you are, thank you for all of your efforts as director of our Office of Rural Prosperity. It's great to be here with you and really talk about the investments and the vision I think that we all share for lifting up small towns, rural communities. I grew up in one in northern Michigan, and think it is so very important that we're lifting up quality of life, both farmers and those not on the farm, and just the broader rural community. It's so very important. And I know the Secretary has talked about all the different investments. I mean, when you look at everything from the American Rescue Plan and the transportation efforts, you know, finally coming out of COVID, we didn't have to convince people that high-speed internet is actually a part of necessary infrastructure. You know, people were finally figuring that out, and now we just got to make that happen. The Inflation Reduction Act, all of the efforts that we can do together around that. We have put things in place that frankly need to just happen for the next multiple years to like really take hold as we turn this economic engine around. And today I want to talk about how we do the next step to continue to give our farmers and our families the certainty they need. And that is, frankly, a 5-year farm bill. I have been in the U.S. House and Senate now a long time. It's my 28th year. I've been a part of 6 farm bills. So this is the 3rd one I've led. Shoot me now. So this is the hardest one I mean, they're always difficult. But at this stage, we're usually beyond the politics of nutrition and food, and we're down to actually, negotiating farm bill. And that hasn't happened yet. But being the eternal optimist, I am working hard, and my colleagues, Democratic colleagues, particularly in the Senate, are working hard to get the bipartisan support that we've got to need. We've got to have. We put together the Rural Prosperity and Food Security Act. And that's what we are pushing on. I want to share a little bit about this today, because if I was here saying the president just signed it, you'd be jumping up and down with balloons and cake and whatever else, you know. And people across the country would be very excited. And we know we have to negotiate that. That's all part of it. But we have a basis of something that would move us to the next step. And it's serious. It reflects bipartisan priorities that do three things that I've said over and over again need to be our goals. Keep farmers farming, keep families fed, and keep rural communities strong. And that's what we do. And we really need to get this passed as soon as possible. And I'm literally working every day on trying to make that happen. But the foundation of a successful farm bill is built on a broad bipartisan coalition. It's farmers and ranchers and rural communities and foresters and nutrition and hunger advocates and conservationists and bioenergy advocates and local governments and climate advocates. It's everybody, which is why I'm going to ask for your help today, because it's not about dividing people. You will never get a bill. It's about bringing that coalition together and keeping that coalition together. And the Rural Prosperity and Food Security Act does that on a broad basis. In fact, I've included over 100 bipartisan bills in our Farm Bill, bills that Republicans and Democrats on my committee and off my committee have been working on together this Congress. We have included all of that as part of what we are doing. We're strengthening the farm safety net, which is so important, by making meaningful investments that frankly focus our tax dollars on American farmers that have dirt under their fingernails, not Wall Street bankers and foreign investors. We should not be offering commodity farm payments to those folks, and we don't in this bill. Importantly, we focus on beginning farmers. You know, like so many of us, folks are reaching retirement. And whether it's young people continuing the family farm or whether it's new people wanting to go into farming, we have to make that accessible for future farmers, for all of us. We provide farmers and ranchers more timely and flexible choices, things like crop insurance that helps cover risk, and more flexible commodity programs, and more opportunity for affordable credit so you can operate the farm. And we focus on specialty crops, fruits and vegetables, which we grow many, many of in Michigan, and our dairy farmers. So we look at all of it around the country. And we are supporting rural communities, because we know that supporting communities goes far beyond the farm, far beyond the farm. And all you have to do is look at the bioeconomy that the secretary was talking about. Across the country, bio-based products have grown into $489 billion industry that supports over 4 million jobs and counting right now. In the 2014 Farm Bill, the first one that I wrote as chair, I created something to focus on bio-based manufacturing and biofuels and jobs, and it was called Grow It Here, Make It Here. And we really focused at that point, how do we rev up on the bio-labeling and biomanufacturing? And it's of course it's biofuels, but it's very exciting to see so many ways in which we have bio-based products. In fact, in that year, in 2014, I held up, Ford Motor Company was working with Lear, they still are, to do soy-based foam in their seats. So it's not oil-based, and that's what they do today. Soy foam is in the seats of the vehicles that you are buying, which is great because if you get hungry, got something to munch on. And so, but they gave me a seat, and I would go all over Michigan holding up this seat. This seat has soybeans in it, you know, or the corn-based products that are in the cup holders, and I could go on and on. There are so many opportunities. There's research being done now with Goodyear on tires using soy. So there's so many opportunities beyond the great opportunities on fuels that we need to capture. And that's what we're building on this bill. The other thing we want to do is really focus on all the pressures that families feel in small towns and rural communities and invest in quality of life as a priority. In our bill, we invest in rural health care, including elder care facilities, behavioral health centers, and schools. We focus on the kind of health care that my mom provided when she was director of nursing at the small hospital where I grew up. By the way, if we still have our rural hospitals, they're likely to be the largest employer in town and a center, as you know, of quality of life. And we want to make sure that as many of them as possible can stay there and be able to provide that care. We want young people not to have to leave a small town to be able to feel that they have opportunities. And we know that a big piece of this is childcare. Quality, affordable childcare. So we take a new comprehensive approach to rural childcare by prioritizing projects that address availability, quality, and cost in rural communities. And this is important. And we tear down the barriers in our rural communities to accessing federal resources. Now, I know this continues to be a challenge, although I'm so proud of President Biden and the administration for the Rural Partnerships Network. We need to keep that going, really lifting that up. And in fact, we do that in this bill. The rural development title of the Farm Bill, one of the 12 titles, the rural development title usually authorizes programs, but then they're funded through appropriations. It's not mandatory money. For the first time, we are putting over $500 million in mandatory money into the Rural Partnership Program to make sure it actually happens. It's important that we are investing in quality of life, and we are also very focused in working with our friends and leaders on the Banking and Housing Committee on rural housing, which I know is also critically important. In fact, I was speaking at a conference of 15 small chambers of commerce in northern Lower Michigan, Traverse City area, God's country, in case you have not been there. It is so beautiful. 15 small counties, chambers. Top issue, childcare. Second issue, housing. And these are the local chambers, where years ago, that's not what I would have heard. And so we need to understand that, understand what you see every day, and make sure that the resources are there. And that's what I'm committed to. That's what this administration is committed to as well. We know that all of you, as rural leaders, are yourself juggling numerous responsibilities, and you need funding and staffing to successfully compete for public and private investments. We want to help you do that. The Rural Partnership Program, as you know, and permanently funded, will create a set of programs that we want to have that are flexible, that are multi-year, and that help you support local economic development and community development programs. That's the goal. That is the goal of this legislation. And that's my vision for the next 5-year Farm Bill. I said, I grew up in Michigan, in Clare, and I never would have thought, frankly, I'd be a United States Senator writing my 3rd Farm Bill. I was a city kid. My relatives were all on dairy farms. They were the hardest working people I ever saw in my life. And I've taken those experiences and values with me to Washington to be able to lift up what's really happening in small towns, rural communities across the country. We can get this done. We can achieve it if we work together, if we don't blow up the coalition that has passed every Farm Bill, but brings everybody together. It doesn't demonize our neighbors and friends or somebody maybe we don't even know who needs some temporary help with food. Instead of demonizing that, let's bring the whole coalition together and talk about how we're going to lift up communities and families and our farmers who have the riskiest business in the world. Nobody has to watch the weather like they do. And nobody's been slammed more on the climate crisis. That's real. And so we have a stake in supporting them to be able to do the right thing, both on climate strategies and risk management. And that is important for us to do. So I need everybody in this room to shout from the rooftops about how important this work is, how important it is that we get this bill done and continue the vision of this administration, which I believe is on the right track, and we just need to keep pushing on it to make sure we get the full benefit of all of what we are talking about. We need and can and are rebuilding rural America if we can just keep focused on doing this. There's no doubt in my mind that we can do this. So in places like where I grew up in Clare, in places like where you live, in places where people live all across this country, we need to remember and support them and make sure our rural communities are strong. So thank you very much for giving me a chance to speak this morning. Thank you. And now I'm glad to introduce HHS Deputy Secretary Andrea Palm. Good morning. Welcome. My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm going to get our panel up here. While we're doing that, maybe I'll just, thank you so much again, Senator. Really appreciate it. All right. Again, good morning, everybody. There. I am Andrea Palm. I have the privilege of serving as the Deputy Secretary at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. And as you all know, today we're here to celebrate really the promises that this administration, that the Biden-Harris administration has made and kept to rural communities all across the country. I personally grew up in one of those communities. I grew up in the Adirondacks in upstate New York. I was born in the smallest hospital in New York State, which for many small hospitals like mine no longer does delivery, no longer does maternity care. And so recognize, sort of from my roots, the importance of the ways in which HHS shows up for and integrates the way we think about healthcare with the needs of small and rural communities. And the senator alluded to a number of these things as she's thinking about the Farm Bill and the coalition she's putting together there, about the connection, for example, between behavioral health and chronic disease, about the way care deserts and workforce shortages exacerbate those concerns, and again, the ways in which we as HHS need to show up for rural communities as we do our broader work, as we run this very large enterprise with lots and lots of programs that are designed to help improve the health and well-being of the American people. So I'll note just a couple of examples. Our Health Resources and Services Administration, we lovingly call HRSA for your acronym soup as you're thinking about adding to your dictionary. We've invested over $500 million during this administration in increasing behavioral health care access, specifically in rural communities. And our Medicare program has allocated an additional 1,000 training slots, half of which are focused on rural communities, and some are specifically designated to go to psychiatry slots, again, recognizing that lots of communities lack access to good behavioral health care. And telehealth, while it was a critical piece of how we thought about continuing care during the pandemic, it needs to be a part of how we think about care moving forward. And we have made many investments in telehealth during this administration, including making permanent some flexibilities that we learned to use during the pandemic. And these investments are helping keep health center doors open. We're allowing Medicaid reimbursement, again, a really important piece of rural community healthcare infrastructure. And I know that you believe, as I certainly do, that no one should have to leave their hometown to have access to the kind of quality of life that they need, and to have those opportunities to thrive and raise families in the way in which they really choose to do. So there's really, as you all know, no one size fits all. I'm a practical girl. I claim that proudly, and that comes from living in a community where you put it together. When you needed to solve a problem, you put it together and you figured it out, and it didn't always look the same for each problem, but there's something about that experience and those skills that I feel are really important when you think about serving in government, how you solve problems, how you bring creativity and innovation to the table, to not accept that just because this is the way we've always done it, this is the way that works for all the communities that we serve. And so I'm very anxious to move to our panel here, who are going to share some of their experiences and talk to us about what it means to serve their communities. And so maybe if I could, I would start, Scott, with you. If you could introduce yourself, we'll go down the line, and then we'll engage in some conversation here.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Scott McReynolds. I'm the Executive Director of the Housing Development Alliance in Hazard, Kentucky. And by way of introduction, I want to tell you about my community, because to understand our work, you have to understand our challenges. HDA works in the mountains of East Kentucky, the heart of the Appalachian coal fields, where for over 100 years our community mined the coal that provided the power that helped build America. Unfortunately, when the coal was extracted, they extracted a lot of the wealth from the community as well. So today we are a high need or hard to serve area. Our median income is about half the national average. Our childhood poverty rates approach 40%, and 1 in 6 households live on less than $1,000 a month. But it's not just that we're poor today. We are a persistent poverty community, as Secretary Vilsack discussed. And when you're poor year after year, your challenges compound, your problems become, you get layers of problems, things get intertwined. And if you want to work on one thing, you have to fix this and this and this other thing over here. And oh yeah, this one. And if that wasn't enough, our region was hit by devastating floods in 2022 that destroyed 500 houses and damaged thousands of more. So in this context, when we do housing, we always try to do housing in a way that maximizes the community benefit, in ways that develop workforce, that create good jobs, that support local businesses, that build our tax base and create wealth for low-income individuals. To date, we've leveraged over $42 million of federal funding to build 385 new homes and repair over 1,000 houses. We are especially grateful to the administration's commitment to energy communities, as demonstrated through the Interagency Working Group. We are a partner in a Rural Partnership Network signature project, and we're really excited about the opportunities for energy funding and the Infrastructure or Inflation Reduction Act, because if you can't afford your power bill, your house is not truly affordable.
Thank you so much, Scott. Next, we have Donna Pearson McClish. Maybe you could introduce yourself, please.
Good morning. I'm Donna Pearson McClish from Wichita, Kansas. I am a farmer. I have my farmer brother with me today. We operate a mobile market and mobile food hub in Wichita and the surrounding areas in several counties. We serve both rural and urban communities. When we started in 2014, we were serving only urban communities. But what we've come to discover is that our rural communities have food insecurity and food needs, and senior populations that don't have access to fresh, healthy food. So that's what we do. We move loads and loads and loads of food with our staff. As Secretary Vilsack was talking, I made some notes, and it occurred to me that we had been involved in several other programs that he mentioned with the food systems, the LFPP, the LFPA. One of our farmers, we serve farmers in the Midwestern area, and are tasked to elevate farmers of color with our training dollars. And one of our farmers in Iowa made the statement that because of the LFPA, he had been able to source his vegetables locally through those funds and to upgrade equipment on his farm. So it's, we see the work, we see the funding making an impact for our farmers. The LFPP, of which we're a part of, we serve 12 counties, 12 county corridor from Wichita to Salina, and about a large population of those families are on Medicaid. And with our community partners, Kansas Rural Center, Kansas Farmers Union, some of our community partners, we serve those families in the rural corridors. And we're developing markets for those families, for those farmers, because Common Ground believes that if farmers can feed their communities, if there is ever a COVID disruption in the food chain, then people will have food, good, healthy food to eat. I am the CEO of Common Ground and appointed by Governor Kelly to the State Board of Agriculture, which I have found very interesting work. But we're strengthening our farmer network, both urban and rural, and the food issues in urban America are not different than rural food issues. There is a lack of food available, fresh produce. So that's what our market does. It makes the food available. Our primary goal is to increase access to fresh, healthy food, including proteins, fruits, and vegetables, particularly for historically underserved populations. And with the funding from the Biden administration, we utilized the American Rescue Plan through COVID-19 relief funding for a $250,000 grant to provide vaccination information. We serve about 30 senior and low-income population residences, so we provide vaccination information to those areas. We participated with NCBA CLUSA on the 22007 discrimination funding, from which our farmers were very grateful for the opportunity to make application. And that application process was extended so we could get more farmers in to that application. And we also have a grant from NCBA CLUSA, a Small Grants Cooperative Development Program for historically underserved producers, where we are training them to provide online in-person training, financial impact, developing their business plans, beginning farmers, and every gamut of farming that you could imagine we are attempting to cover so our farmers can be one. They can, we believe in paying them an equitable wage. As Secretary said, there's 20 cents per dollar. When they go to the grocery store, farmers are paid about 20 cents on the dollar. An equitable wage. We believe that they should be the growers in their community, that food should be, we should be decreasing importation of food to communities and ramping up production within our communities, and that our end customer has to be able to afford the produce that we have access to.
Thank you so much, Donna. Next, we have Isabel Velasquez-Velez. Maybe you could introduce yourself.
Good morning. I'm Isabel Velasquez-Velez. I'm a university student from Puerto Rico. I'm an animal science major in the Mayagüez campus. I'm from Moca, which is a town in the northwest side of the island. You won't know about it unless you're heading there. And I'm here as an example of what the Next Gen program can be. It's an IRA-funded program, and I'm visiting in DC to visit the USDA headquarters. Hopefully later I'll talk about how that funding is being implemented in the island.
Excellent, thank you. And finally, last but certainly not least, Renee Ripa. Maybe you could introduce yourself. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Renee Rippey, and I am an educator and director of the Learning Circle Preschool in Dublin, Virginia, which is located in the mountains of the Commonwealth. And I have been working in childcare for over a decade now. I know I don't look it, but no, I've been servicing communities in our area for over a decade now, and Pulaski County is where Dublin is located, and that is roughly 33,000 population, and there's only about 6 preschools that service that entire community. roughly 3% of children of preschool age actually attend a preschool. And that is monumental. We are just one preschool. We are a mission of Dublin United Methodist Church in partnership with the Darst Vermillion Foundation, which helps us maintain our ability to create quality childcare education for all children in our area, regardless of ability or means. And we do that in many different ways by creating a curriculum that is very honed into each child and having quality educators. But then more so, we try to make sure that our tuition is low enough that people who may not be able to afford quality care can have our quality care. Next year, our most expensive class is $150 a month. And so that is something that we try very hard through federal funding, through government, through private funding and fundraisers to be able to sustain our program as best as we can so that we can teach the future generations of our community. And we pride ourselves in that and preparing them by creating a strong foundation academically, socially, emotionally, spiritually, and mentally for these children so that they have the best opportunity to thrive when they go into kindergarten and then beyond.
Great, thank you. Actually, maybe we'll keep rolling on childcare and pull the thread on how you've been able to leverage federal grants, federal resources to do the work that you're doing.
Absolutely. So in our preschool, just like every preschool and around the nation, the pandemic hit us very hard. There were there were regulations put in place that obviously were for the health and wellness of the children as well as the staff to decrease the amount of enrollment so that there was more space in between children. And obviously when you decrease enrollment, even with our small amount of tuition, that greatly impacts our bottom line. We ran at a very strong deficit, and my predecessor was very instrumental in making sure that, realizing that we need to keep our educators that we have. We need to keep the people that we have because frankly, there's not a lot of educators out there today. And so she went ahead and applied for the American Rescue Plan Act grant, and we received roughly $36,000 from that grant. And we were able to keep our educators. We have 44 children in our preschool as our max enrollment, and we were at less than half when we were in COVID. And coming out of COVID, that takes time to recover. And so we immediately took those funds and put them towards our educators and making sure that we could, maintain them and not have to lay anybody off. I received the final installment after I took over as director, and we were also able to put that towards some of the deficit that we had from, losing, enrollment and just overhead costs greatly increased, just like in every other sector. And so we made sure that we, put those funds to good use. We felt strongly that obviously back of house costs are important to maintain a quality education, but also we realized that, we've been in operation for roughly, for over 25 years. And so some of our resources and materials in our classrooms were definitely showing their age. And so we replaced some of those materials and really honed in on making sure that those materials were academically and age appropriate and had a goal for every single thing that we brought into the classroom. And so those funds went directly to children and directly into their education, and not just, through, kind of trickling down into them. It was actively used in our classrooms and not just for our overhead costs, which is also extremely imperative. I mentioned, keeping our educators. This year I have had to replace some educators, and it has been a severe challenge. In our community, only 20% of adults hold a bachelor's degree or higher. The national average is 54%. And if you think about it, how many of those 20% are educators? How many of those are willing to work in childcare? Because as much as childcare often is viewed as, babysitting, we are professionals in our area, and licensing requires teachers to have a bachelor's degree or an associate's directly in education. And there's simply not enough people in our community that hold those credentials. And we can't change that. The Learning Circle can't change that today, right here and right now. But the children that come through our preschool and because of the grant that we received, we were able to stay open. These children are our future. They are our future educators. They are our future, mayors. They are our future to every single facet. If you don't have the education base, starting at the beginning, giving these children the best opportunity to grow and thrive, then you don't have as big of an opportunity for them to go on into higher education. Preschool studies show time and time and time again that if you go to preschool, especially a quality preschool, that you have a higher likelihood of going to school and staying in school and having less truancy. You have a less likelihood of following paths into our incarceration in the future, and you have a higher likelihood of going into a 2-year, 4-year, or even longer into master's and PhD programs. And so we are changing that narrative, or trying to change that narrative in our preschool right here, right now, with our 4-year-olds and our 5-year-olds. And if it weren't for this grant, we would be facing shutting our doors. We would be facing having to lower the amount of enrollment that we have been able to sustain for 25 years. And that is absolutely monumental. And DARS Vermillion, the foundation that helps fund us, also is monumental in that. We have to make sure that we are, the future is in our classrooms today. They're in there right now, actually. I really hope that they are having a lot of fun right now. I am much used to everybody being shorter than me, so this is a whole nother world. But because not only am I director, but I'm also one of the teachers, because we are that small. So I am still in the classroom. I'm still teaching children and seeing the impacts day to day as they grow and learn, and how this funding and funding in the future, how that can impact these small communities that we live in, and how they can better our societies and better our economy, but also just our future. Because if we don't have them, they will leave, and we will not have the opportunities that will sustain our small communities for years to come.
Thank you so much, and
Thank
thank
you.
you for your service to the next generation.
Thank you.
I would say, I talked a little bit about the 1,000 slots and focusing on rural communities, right? But those are doctors, and there's a broader care economy here that Ms. Rippey is describing, where we also need and have made investments. We've done a number of things in Head Start and childcare to try to do everything from increase wages to make sure that folks are interested in pursuing careers in early childhood education, recognizing that that's such a foundation of the way in which we all work and are successful in our lives and in our community. So really appreciate you highlighting that. Isabel, you noted Next Gen and previewed that you might tell us a little bit more about that. So let me give you an opportunity to do that.
Thank you very much. I was told to give a little bit of background. For background, both my parents are engineers, so I grew up thinking, okay, I like fixing stuff. I love building stuff with my hands. I'll be an engineer too. Then 2 years into the program, I realized I'm not passionate about being an engineer. I like building stuff. I don't love building stuff. So I'm like, okay, my dad's been telling me since high school, you love animals, be a vet. And I figured after 2 years, I should listen to my dad. So I applied. I switched majors to an animal science major. And even though it's a bunch of science classes, which I do not like, I am actually loving it. So in switching majors, I noticed the professors not only were a lot happier, also they wanted to be a lot more involved in the program. And one of my professors was saying, okay, we just got this grant from USDA. It's part of a program. It's got divided in all the campuses, and you can apply for 2 scholarships. So I applied to, it was Leading Hispanics and Texas Scholars. I applied to Texas Scholars. I got in, obviously. And it was able, they have 3 missions. The Next Gen has 3 missions with these scholarships. It's to offer us job opportunities that we weren't aware of, internship opportunities where we can get more knowledge, and to help offset our tuition with these scholarships, which it's been helping a lot. And with these scholarships, you get a mentor, and you get to do an internship program. With my mentor, we're dealing with cattle, specifically in how, for Puerto Rico, it's a tropical island. It can get very hot, and it's always very humid. So we're looking at how the mutated short hair cattle, the natural is longer type, or wild type, they handle heat a lot better. They have they have a larger sweat gland that helps them regulate their body temperatures a lot better. And this allows not only for the farmers to have less money to like help produce the same amount, but they're producing a lot more in a lot less time. So it's a more efficient across the board. And so my dream is to become a veterinarian, specifically with larger animals. So in doing this research, I'm looking for ways to help my own island. I'm helping us to produce better because a lot of our production, a lot of our food is imported. So that's a very big problem when we have problems with like the hurricane, which stopped basically everything. So I want to be able to help produce more agriculture in our island.
Thank you and congratulations. All right. Maybe you both alluded a little bit to the ways in which federal funding are supporting your programs. I don't know if there's any pieces of that, maybe Donna, starting with you, that you want to highlight for this group. I welcome that.
I did want to highlight the 22007 discrimination program, where the opportunity for farmers to apply if they felt they had been discriminated before 2021 to apply for federal funds again. That program was very popular, very successful. The application process was a little cumbersome. Farmers had to go back many years sometimes to figure out what had happened. In our case, our parents were part of the Pickford Glickman lawsuit. And so our farm we've been farming for 56 years. But our farm has seen the change come about, and the American Rescue Plan and the IRA, yes, you know what I'm talking about. Inflation Reduction Act, sorry about that. They have been very, very phenomenal as game changers in providing funding for our farmers in both urban and rural areas. Our farm is located at the dead end of a section, and it was rural before the city grew around us and built a highway in front of us. So we've experienced that rural part. We've experienced the industrial mode of moving. We've experienced those things that rural and urban communities experience. But now that we are involved with the local food production program, and we have that 12-county rural corridor that we serve, we're seeing the rural communities come to us and say, help us to form our own farmers market, help us, how can we do value-added products, how can we develop our own communities so we are serving our communities and we're not importing most of our food. So the funds have been a game changer, and I so appreciate the administration for having this foresight to do this.
Thank you so much. Scott, over to you.
I think the best way to explain the impact of federal programs is to tell you a story about, and I want to tell you Lindsay's story. Lindsay grew up in our community, and like far too many of our people, she became addicted to opioids. She started using at just 16 and continued to use for 15 years until her addiction spiraled out of control and she landed up in jail. While she was in jail, she participated in a recovery program and became sober in August of 2020. After jail, Lindsay was participating in the Perry County Drug Court. And a couple of years earlier, HCA had partnered with Drug Court, some other recovery providers, the Hazard Community and Technical College, and on an ARC Power grant to create a program called Hope Building. Hope Building is a paid on-the-job training program for people in recovery. And the trainees learn construction by building homes that are sold to people in our community who typically make just a little bit too much for federal programs. So one of our challenges is that we have some of the lowest area median incomes in the nation. And the way AMIs determine your eligibility for programs, and the way AMIs are calculated, you're sort of penalized if you happen to live in a poor community in a poor state. And so we have families that would be considered low income and eligible for assistance almost anywhere else in the U.S., and they can't get help here. And so by building these houses with the trainees, we're able to serve them. So through drug court, Lindsay became involved in Hope Building. It was immediately clear that she had an aptitude for construction, but what really impressed us was her sheer determination to succeed and build a better life for her family and her 2 young children. She completed her year of training, and including all the 4 certificates offered by the community college, and became the first person in her family to graduate from any sort of college program. Fortunately, at the time she graduated, we had another partner, Fahi, had another ARC-funded power grant that provided funding for an internship. So we were able to hire Lindsay as an intern to help train our trainees. And that proved so invaluable by the end of the internship that we had to hire her as our assistant trainer. Lindsay says that when she got sober, she had 2 goals for her and was able to raise her children again. She had 2 goals. One was to get them a puppy, and the other was to get them a home. Now that Lindsay had a permanent job, she could pursue home ownership through our program. Her credit wasn't great, but her real obstacle was her debt load. She just owed too much money. So we sent Lindsay to Redbud Financial Alternatives, which is a CDFI that we created years earlier to combat predatory lending. Because of her not so great credit, Lindsay was paying 23% interest on her car loan and 35% interest on a personal loan. After some counseling, Redbud was able to consolidate her debt into a new 6% loan and saved her over $10,000 in interest payments. And this lower payment made her eligible for a new home. When HDA builds a new home and helps somebody become a homeowner, we have 2 challenges. First, our housing market is broken, so it costs more to build a house than it appraises for. It'll cost $225,000 and appraise for $175,000. And the second is our incomes are so low that even folks, most of our borrowers can't afford to finance that lower $175,000. We solved these 2 problems by combining low-cost financing through the USDA Rural 502 Direct Lending Program with subsidy programs like the HUD SHOP program, HUD Home program, as well as state and local resources. In Lindsay's case, her home is being financed with an RD mortgage, SHOP funding, including her own sweat equity, and funds from the State Affordable Housing Trust Fund. This July, Lindsay and her 2 children will move into their new home. It will be the first time that they've each had their very own room. Iris, age 5, is very excited to pick out the color of her new room. It will also be the first time that her kids have had a yard. Waylon, age 8, is a little bit worried about all the grass he's going to have to cut. But he says it'll be worth it because it'll be a great place for their puppy.
Thank you. I think that's a great place to end. I'd like to thank this panel for really bringing to life the challenges and the ways in which you all problem solve in partnership with us here at the federal government to serve your communities and do the work of helping lift them up so they're able to thrive and be successful in their lives. Really do appreciate you coming here today, sharing all of your expertise and your stories, and thank you all for being here with us today. And with that, I will turn it back over to drum roll, please. All right, to her.
There you are. Hi, hello. Okay, I'm gonna get started. Hi, Samantha Silverberg, so nice to meet you. So I work here at the White House. I help implement the bipartisan infrastructure law. And so we are going to bring up our panelists for our next panel on rural infrastructure. And while they get situated, I'm just gonna give a few framing remarks, and then we're gonna get right into it. So first of all, welcome, thank you. I know many of you have traveled from all different parts of the country, and we're just thrilled to have you here at the White House and appreciate some of the logistical creativity throughout the morning. Again, I help oversee our work implementing the bipartisan infrastructure law, which is part of the broader economic vision of President Biden that we call the Investing in America agenda. That, of course, is the American Rescue Plan, the bipartisan infrastructure law, or bill as we call it, the Inflation Reduction Act and the CHIPS and Science Act. And all together, those pieces of legislation have just tremendous potential to really reshape our economy and transform our communities, including our rural communities. And we have hit the ground running. We're about 2.5 years into implementation of the infrastructure law, and we have over 56,000 projects that are underway and $450 billion out the door. Some of the key examples from sectors that we all care about. Obviously, the law is a huge investment in transportation, over 165,000 miles of roads and over 9,000 bridges underway, including off-system bridges and rural roads. Water, we'll hear a bit about some water investments today. We financed over 1,400 water investments, including projects that will replace over 1.7 million toxic lead pipes. We've doubled the amount of funding available for the regional commissions, which are small but mighty organizations that support rural communities, like in Appalachia, the Mississippi Delta, and the Black Belt. And we've launched over 4,000 resilience projects all over the country to make our communities more resilient to flood, fires, storms, drought, and all sorts of other risks. We've also invested significantly in high-speed internet. We know that you can't go to school, go to work, access healthcare these days without a reliable, affordable internet. And so we've awarded over $2 billion in USDA Reconnect loans, and we've made more than $40 billion available through the BEAD program. Those are just a few of the examples of the work that we're doing. It's interesting and helpful when the White House talks about some of those kind of big numbers, but I think it's always even more meaningful when we hear from folks on the ground. And so with that, we're going to start our panel. I'm joined by 4 amazing panelists that represent different parts of the country, labor, business, local electeds. I think we really have a strong set of folks who are going to tell us a bit more about how these investments are supporting our rural communities. So with that, I'm going to very gracefully get up on stage. And Keith, I'm going to turn to you to get us started.
Good morning. I'm Keith Holden. I'm the CEO and General Manager of Focus Broadband. We're a small telephone cooperative that's based in southeastern North Carolina. We were founded in 1955 to provide telephone service to unserved areas, but over the last couple decades, more and more we've realized broadband has become so needed in our communities. So we've worked hard to do that, and we currently serve about 70,000 members in southeastern North Carolina.
I'm Josh Pettis. I am the local mayor for the city of Osseo in Wisconsin. It's a city that's very similar to probably a lot of yours. It's 1,800 people. And I will be talking about wastewater.
Great.
Good afternoon. I'm Keith Busby. I'm with the Communication Workers of America. I'm a district broadband policy lead, so I'll be talking about some labor in the administration.
Good afternoon. Good morning. I'm Curtis Wynn, CEO of Seco Energy. We're located in Central Florida, where a lot of people are moving to. Seco Energy serves roughly 240,000 electric accounts and about 500,000 people. We're one of the largest co-ops in the country, 7th largest. The experiences I've experienced in Seco are much different from the ones I experienced when in my former place of work, which 2.5 years ago I left Roanoke Electric Cooperative in northeastern North Carolina, which was about 15,000 electric consumers. I often say that where we are at Seco, we'll probably pick up about 11,000 consumers this year, which I've spent 24 years trying to move us off of 14,000 in North Carolina. So I say that just to draw a contrast and share about the variety of the types of electric co-ops across the country. And in my conversation today, I'll just be sharing some experiences about what we're doing at Seco and what's happening through all of the federal funding with electric cooperatives across the country is a major game changer, and some exciting things are happening that we certainly want to share that are moving in a positive direction.
Thank you. Okay, so we're now going to ask each of our panelists to share a story or a couple stories about how the President's Investing in America agenda is supporting their communities and supporting their infrastructure. So, Keith, why don't I start with you?
All right. Well, the COVID-19 pandemic really shined a light on how important broadband was to the communities around us. And our members were fortunate in that we offered high-speed broadband throughout, but surrounding communities often weren't served. So we started looking for ways to edge out into those neighborhoods, and we found the USDA Reconnect program, USDA Community Connect program, and also North Carolina state grant programs that were funded through the American Rescue Plan. So we started applying for these grants about 2021 and have since been awarded approximately $65 million to build out into these areas. So we're currently building in 10 different counties in North Carolina, primarily in the southeastern corner. These are counties that are persistent poverty counties. They're some of the most socially vulnerable counties in the state, and they had just been left behind. Without these funds, we would have never been able to expand into these areas. It's very difficult to make a business case to go into new markets like this. Construction costs when you're building a fiber optic network can be roughly $60,000 a mile. So if you're passing just a handful of customers in that mile, you never get a return on your investment. So the federal programs, they've made it possible for us to be constructing past about 19,000 additional homes. And each one of those homes has their own story. We see over and over again education, career, and medical. One of the first grants we were doing, we had a groundbreaking ceremony, and it was a small church we were setting up, and an elderly individual stopped to see what was going on. His local church, and he wasn't aware that we had won a grant for his community, and really didn't think he would be that excited about it, but he immediately started talking about his heart monitor and how he needed internet access to upload the data on that to his doctors in Duke. So again and again, we see how important it is. A lot of us that's had broadband, for years, you probably think more of entertainment, but you forget of all the other important things that you use it for every day. One other aspect that's really important as we've gone into these communities that, have such poverty was the Affordable Connectivity Program. And unfortunately, the funding for that is running out. We're hoping that Congress will find a way to refund that and keep it going. It's been very important to us. Over and over again, we've heard from our members, just how important it is. Spoke to a young single mother, and she was telling me about her son had mental health issues. And there was times where he couldn't actually attend public school because of the issues he had. But through this program, they could afford broadband, and he would be able to keep up with his schoolwork at home and not get further behind. So, there's concern now with individuals like this, what's going to happen if the program doesn't continue. And companies like ours, we've worked hard. We had plans to where if someone qualified for the Affordable Connectivity Program, that they could get access to internet at no charge. And we can do our part to try to continue that the best we can, but we definitely need continued federal assistance with programs like this.
That we agree there. Mayor Pettis, can you tell us more about infrastructure in your community?
Yeah, so to give you a better highlight of the impact that the bipartisan infrastructure bill did for our municipality, some historical context would be helpful. So I got elected when I was 28. The previous guy had been there for 20 years, and we've heard it said a lot today about people that just get stuck and don't want to change because it's not fixed, or it's not broke, don't fix it. But that wasn't the mentality that I ran on my platform on, because I knew that our infrastructure was highly dated. We just completed a water treatment plant for $7 million. That was done last fall. The only huge downside to having a new water treatment plant is how you're going to pay for it. Unfortunately, that was not part of the bipartisan infrastructure law, but it forced us to raise the rates on each one of our individual households by 117%. So that was a huge hit on everybody, more so on the individuals with fixed incomes, the single parents, the elderly. So then when the wastewater treatment plant came along, that was kind of a forced project because the DNR had changed their phosphorus limit rates, so we weren't able to hit those anymore. And instead of getting fined $20,000 a day for not being compliant, we were forced to build this new facility. But thanks to the USDA loans that we received, we were able to get $7.8 million in the first run for a low interest loan. And then we received $750,000 in grant. By the time that all this bidding went back and forth, the bids obviously came back tremendously high after COVID. So we reapplied, working with our engineer firms, to USDA. They gave us an additional $5.6 million in low interest loan and also another $750,000 in additional grant. So without those investments from USDA, the only other way we could have did it was to not build it and been not compliant and been fined, or we would have had to raise the sewer rates on each individual payer by approximately 450% on top of the 117% that the water bills already went through. So that is just the overall, severe impact that this administration's bipartisan infrastructure law did to a community of our size of 1,800 people. So very appreciative of that.
Thank you so much. Keith, can you share more from the kind of the labor and worker perspective?
Sure. So I want to, piggyback off of something Keith said a little earlier, which we share the same name, so, But going back to the ACP, Affordable Connectivity, to put it in perspective, we're spending roughly $43 billion as a country to improve broadband. 23 million people use the ACP program, and we're about to cut the funding. So I would urge you to reach out to your representatives, especially rural America, right? So we're here today for rural America. So I would guess a large amount of those folks are, participants in that program. So as we put the fiber in the dirt or in the air, we need to make sure that people still have means to use it, means to have access to it, because that's why we're putting it there. So, that's just kind of tied in. Now, going back to the work, this is how it ties in by the training, by hiring the folks to do the work, to put the fiber in the ground or put it in the air, however they're going to do it, on the construction side of it, and then the maintenance afterwards. Because, this is like another rare opportunity. Once in my lifetime, the gray is real. So it's probably not going to be happening again while I'm here. So the reality is that what you don't want to have is, you don't want to, let's say, think you bought a Corvette, find out you bought a Yugo 5 years from now. You know what I'm saying? So you need to make sure that your workforce is trained, highly skilled, they operate safely, and that's, part of what CWA is about in this process. So I've been able to, be involved with work task force, apprenticeship programs, OSHA 10 safety programs. That's some of the things that we all offer through CWA. And all of that has been made possible through working with the IIJA, working with the NTIA, and working with the government and state level programs. So I'm thankful for this because I think it's going to pay dividends for our country for years to come.
Thanks so much. Curtis?
So earlier in the introductions, I mentioned the past experiences at Roanoke Electric, and just to give a little bit of context of the differences, Roanoke Electric is located in one of the most economically distressed regions of the country, and most of those 15,000 accounts we had were in that economically distressed category. So fast forward to where we are today, even though we're in a fast-growing environment, a third of our members fall into that same category as living in economically distressed areas and having a lot of energy burden. So while we're focusing on the growth, we're also having to come up with that same creativity that we had to have in North Carolina to serve our members. And that's where we find ourselves being so grateful now to be a part of the infrastructure funding that's happening. If you look at electric cooperatives from a broader aspect and how it has impacted electric cooperatives across the country, there are 900 plus electric cooperatives across the United States. Most of the cooperatives serve low wealth communities, persistent poverty counties. And just as a broad snapshot, coming from our National Electric Cooperative Association, these are the numbers that, just to share a little bit of the impact. Under the New Era and PACE program, over $8 billion have been awarded to co-ops, and they're invited to move to the next step. In energy infrastructure itself, over $1.2 billion for co-ops that are now in the negotiation stage of those contracts. And speaking of broadband, I know we talked some about broadband earlier. Co-ops are getting into that area, and they need a lot of help. Because I was one of those in North Carolina. $42 billion under the BEAD program, and then roughly $20 billion in other programs. So the money is flowing to rural America, and electric cooperatives are part of that. So if you just take a look at how it has impacted SECO, I want to just share a project that we've been engaged with that goes from top to bottom. In the electric utility space, especially for co-ops, most of us as SECO are distribution co-ops. It means we sell power to the end consumer. But there are also generation and transmission co-ops, like the one that we have in Florida. Seminole Electric is our G&T, as we call it. They generate and transmit the power to the distribution co-ops, and we sell it to the end consumers. The one project that I'll share about that's under the New Era program is one in which it really touches all aspects of that power delivery process, if you will. Seminole generating the power. We have, in the proposal that I'm talking about now, there were 2 distribution cooperatives, SECO Energy and Swanee Valley Electric Cooperative, as a part of the proposal. Just a few, leading up to the project, the Seminole board, well before I was in Florida, had made a decision to discontinue using one of its coal-fired facilities. There were 2 facilities, and one was taken out of service, and the other was used much less than it had been in the future. And that was a very strategic decision on Seminole's part to move in that direction. But just to give some context of what that means from a clean energy perspective, I'll share some of the reductions that came out of just that one decision. If you look at the amount of coal production that came out of that, there's about a 25.7% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from just that decision. And moving forward, the funding that's coming through the New Era program is going to allow Seminole and the 9 co-ops that it serves to install over 782 megawatts of solar. That's a lot of solar. And that is going to help displace the production of power that was once produced with coal. Along with that, because coal or solar is very unpredictable. Right now outside is cloudy. But in the utility space, you have to have constant power. You cannot afford to have any brownouts or blackouts. What will support this solar production is battery backup, large-scale battery backup, which is a part of the proposal that Seminole, along with the 2 cooperatives that I mentioned, Swanee Valley Electric and SECO Energy. Now, that's the generation and transmission component of the entire process. Now, if you move down to the distribution level where I sit in Swanee Valley, also as a part of the project that was proposed under the New Era program, we're looking at more generation through solar and battery, but this time at the distribution level. One of the things we suffer with as cooperatives or utilities in general is something we call losses. So where it's generated, by the time it gets to your home, there's a lot of loss of that generation. So by generating the power closer to where it's being used, where it will help reduce that loss component of the overall process. So with the two cooperatives, distribution cooperatives, also installing solar and battery closer to where it's being used, that's going to also help make the system more efficient. And the final piece of this that I think is a growing part of this whole process is something we started thinking about here recently, and that is how do we help solve this emissions problem behind the meter? What I mean by that is how do we work and engage with our members to help them do things within their homes that produces or causes more of a demand for the product that we produce. Energy efficiency, smart appliances, understanding when is the best time to charge that electric vehicle that will not put a strain on the system. Putting in systems that will allow that to happen. That is also under the SECO component of this is some of the investments that we're planning to make to help work with our members to produce less of a demand on the supply side, which is going to help reduce the greenhouse gas emissions that we're faced with. So that is I think what is going to be a very productive, efficient, and rate containment project that's going to help those energy burdened families. We're being very intentional about moving a lot of this infrastructure and making sure as the requirements are dictating that we pay a lot of attention to those 82,000 member consumers who are in those economically distressed areas, because that is a major part of what we're trying to do with these community investments. So that's the one project that we feel very good about, and it would not have happened, it would not have been possible without the funding coming through the USDA New Era project.
Thanks so much,
program.
Curtis. It's great to hear how forward-leaning and innovative the co-ops are. You know, maybe more so than some of the big guys. So thanks for sharing some of those stories. So we've got about 8 or so minutes left. So I think we'll do about 2-minute lightning round down the line again. So you know, knowing who you have here in the room, watching us on the live stream. What else do you want to share on infrastructure in your communities, infrastructure in the president's agenda? Any closing remarks? And we'll start with you, Keith.
And Curtis hit on it, but one big thing that's coming related to broadband is the BEAD funding.
Mm-hmm.
And the states have kind of been given the directive and the opportunity to provide that money or offer it up. And so we're looking, you know, within the next year, we're thinking those funds will start coming out. And I would suggest, you know, I'm very pro-cooperative also. Each of you probably reach out to the cooperatives in your footprint if you do have any, and just kind of ask them, you know, are they looking to take advantage of any of that funding? I feel like it's a once in a lifetime opportunity. You know, we've kind of done studies in North Carolina, and we feel like there's enough funding that most, if not all, of the state could get fiber optic networks into rural communities. And, you know, we feel like that can be an amazing transformation for our area.
Mayor?
So I think that you know, once we've completed these two massive infrastructure projects, the next projects we're hoping to work on, I know it's been mentioned as well, is the rural housing and how, you know, you create that economic development within your communities. The battle that we're constantly going with is you don't have enough housing, so you can't bring in the industry. You don't have the industry, so you can't bring in the housing. And you really can't do one without the other. So trying to do those simultaneously has been our next initiative. So we've been working closely with a couple different government agencies on the rural housing problem, and I know that's not just a Wisconsin problem. That's a U.S. problem in general. So I think that the more we can focus on that, I think we'll solve a lot of other problems along the way and create some of that economic development.
So I would say pertaining to broadband, as these monies roll out and they get down to the towns and, you know, local governments, You want to make sure that you're active in the process and understand that you only really got one shot at this. So you want to make sure the workforce is vested to the community. That's important. You don't want them to just come in, do the work, and leave. You want them to be vested there, live there, work there. Again, the benefits are helping rural America. So as this money's here, you want to make sure those folks are tied to it. And the second thing would just be making sure that did I just draw a blank? Yeah, make sure that you let them know you're active in the process. Be vocal about it, you know, because you're basically how they spend the money, how the town spends the money, how the company spend the money, you know, you need to be active in that process.
Curtis?
I'd leave all of us with just the understanding that climate change equates to community change. What I mean by that is one of the components of the application process is making sure we have a community benefit plan. How does this funding help the community? So we're collaborating with community leaders, community partners, broadband providers, entities that are involved in energy efficiency, entities that are involved in any type of housing component, because the leveraging opportunity that we can see through this funding is enormous when we bring the communities together. And quite frankly, in most small communities, the electric cooperative is in the best position to corral others to come along. It is not a utility initiative alone. We need all of the community partners to work with us to help the ones who are most importantly impacted by this, and that's the end consumer, especially those who are energy burdened and who are having to make those tough decisions between paying their electric bill versus buying medicine or caring for their children. So community change, climate change would be my last words on that.
Love that. Okay, well, I'm going to wrap up a few themes that I've heard here, and then we'll thank our panelists. So, you know, I think we heard from both Keiths that this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity or a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. All the more reason for everyone to participate, right? Be active participant in the planning, in the change, in the engagement in your communities. You know, we hear about healthier communities, safer communities. Curtis, when you're talking about climate change is community change. When you're talking about climate and air, right, that's really about making sure that our families and children can breathe clean air and that we're protecting our planet for the future. You know, Mayor Pettis talked about lowering costs. At the end of the day, you know, we talk a lot about infrastructure as things, but there's also good research. The American Society of Civil Engineers came out with a report yesterday, actually, that the investments that we're making here are saving people money. Right, they're saving money because you don't have to raise rates when you're upgrading your water plants and your broadband infrastructure and your electric infrastructure. And then we heard a lot, I think, about good jobs, right? This is fundamentally an opportunity for good jobs and also good careers. These are for life-changing careers. We hear that from our labor friends all the time, that this is not just about a job, but really about a lifestyle. And, you know, the president, as you know, is fully committed to that. And so I think two calls to action. One is that active participation. The other is telling the story. We need your help. We can use your help. I know that's part of the call to action for these communities and action events to make sure that you continue to tell those stories. I'll share a few resources that we've released just recently. So this is actually Infrastructure Week. I should have mentioned that at the top. It's also an infrastructure decade, as we like to say. But the White House released a new national fact sheet just yesterday that rolls up all the progress we've made across the infrastructure law over the last 2.5 years. So I encourage you to check that out. We've also posted new state-by-state fact sheets on invest.gov. So invest.gov is our resource, and the state-by-state fact sheets there are providing information on investments and resources across the Investing in America agenda. So not just the bill, but also the IRA, the CHIPS and Science Act, the ARP, bipartisan infrastructure law, as well as private sector investments too, because we know that one of the benefits of the president's infrastructure law, as well as his Investing in America agenda, is that we're spurring private sector investment in everything from manufacturing, EVs, batteries, biotech, and other sources. So encourage you to do that. Encourage you to continue to tell your stories. I think we heard some really, really compelling stories here. I might borrow the one about the the individual with the heart condition and need to connect to internet. I feel like that's a good one. And with that, why don't we just give a round of applause for our panelists. And I think we may have a short break before, no? They're ready, okay.
Go ahead.
And I handle rural and agriculture engagement here in the White House Office of Public Engagement, and excited to turn it over to our fearless leader in the White House Office of Public Engagement, Senior Advisor to the President, Director of the White House Office of Public Engagement, Mayor Steve Benjamin. So we'll turn it over to him to get us started.
Did he say fearless leader? That's the first one that I kind of dig it. So it's so great to see all of you here today. See several friends and hopefully some new friends. And really, some of you who know me know I don't usually wear glasses. I don't need them, but I can't see without them. So I will put them on. It's really been exciting to hear about all the incredible work that's being done all across the country and rural communities, especially as we celebrate Infrastructure Week. This week. It's great to see rural community leaders as well as those from tribal nations and territories represented here today as well, and also have so many people joining us via live stream. I remember 5-6 years ago when I was still mayor, I sat with a prominent minister and told him the story of my family, my parents being migrants from rural South Carolina, where my mother would tell me she spent lots of days in the fields, and how there were migrants to New York City in that last wave of African-American migrants. And he commented to me, Mr. Mayor, he said, your parents weren't migrants. He said, your parents were refugees. And it stuck with me. He said, because your parents didn't have a choice but to leave rural America in search of what they thought was economic opportunity. And that struck me as I ascended into this role, serving the people of the country, serving this White House, and serving this amazing president, because he's made very clear that he does not believe that people should have to leave the people they love, the communities they love and value, the lifestyle that has been sacrosanct to them and their families for generations in search of opportunity. No one should have to leave the zip code that they call home. And that's what today is really all about. Before we get started, I did want to highlight that the White House just this morning released a fact sheet highlighting the Biden-Harris administration's historic investment in rural communities. We also announced a new Rural Innovators Program, a recognition program to highlight the incredible work that so many rural community leaders do across the country. To nominate a rural innovator in your community, please visit rural.gov, and hopefully we'll see a significant number of nominations. It's my pleasure to welcome to the stage a true leader in the administration who's doing just that, our Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg. I'm going to invite our wonderful secretary to come join us right now. We're going to get on stage, and we have this pretty good fireside chat thing we do. So come on, Pete, come do it with me.
Morning.
I asked
I
asked the secretary before he came out which side was his good side, and he said they're both pretty good. So
that's not what I said.
But glad to have former mayor and now Secretary Buttigieg, who's been a friend for a number of years, just to join us. I'm going to actually take a shot at a couple of questions of my own, and then if we have time, I'd love for some of you maybe to share some questions with the secretary as well. Mr. Secretary, I know that you prioritize meeting with local leaders on the ground as the Department of Transportation implements the historic investments in transportation from the bipartisan infrastructure law, and the mayor, the secretary, Pete, and I we would come here how often for Infrastructure Week when we're mayors? I mean, every other week it seemed like. And now we have an infrastructure decade because of the leadership of President Biden. As you travel to rural communities, what have you learned, and how has this informed the way the agency engages with rural communities to meet their needs?
Well, thanks. As you said, and of course, Mayor, you and I share the same orientation of engaging at the local level. When I was a mayor, I really believed that local leadership is where most of the action is. That's what I believed to be true then. Now that I'm here, I know that to be true. It's very clear that the measure of our success as an administration is whether we're making it easier on the ground for America's mayors and towns and counties to and communities to get things done. I also remember what it was like to be a mayor of what I liked to think of as a mid-sized city, but I was often told was a small town, knocking on the door of the US DOT, trying to get answers and trying to get results. And so we have sought to make our department more user-friendly, including bringing it to different communities. We're down to, I think, 3 states left that I haven't had a chance to get to since getting this job. And when we go, we don't just go to the biggest cities with the biggest airports. We make a point of going to places that don't always get visits from cabinet officials because, again, the test of whether we are meeting President Biden's standard of reaching everyone everywhere is largely based on whether the things that are unfolding in communities are going the way we think that they will. What we hear, of course, on the ground is a desire to have federal help getting things done without having to mount the army of federal relations specialists that a big city might be able to hire. And that means we have to do 2 things. One is have hands-on help navigating these processes, which we do through our routes team, our rural service transportation program, and a whole set of other technical assistance initiatives that we're running. The other is to make them easier in the first place, and just having fewer pages in a notice of funding opportunity, fewer steps in an application. We actually combined our rural grant program with a couple of other major grant programs. So in the same way that a combined college application means that you don't have to fill in your zip code 7 different times on 7 different sheets of paper, we do the same thing for our federal grants. And we're there really always soliciting feedback, as we are here in this gathering, and I'm looking forward to getting a sense of how things are going in the communities that you serve and look after and care about, to make sure these big federal programs actually turn into something for someone in particular, which is, of course, why we're doing all this in the first place.
Absolutely. So we have this amazing group of leaders, rural community leaders assembled here, Mr. Secretary, and also watching us online. And I know that every single one of them considers safety a top priority for the community. How is DOT helping rural communities create safer transportation systems?
So safety is the number one reason why our department exists. And the reality is that roadway deaths in particular are disproportionately higher in rural, tribal, and low-income communities. This is a crisis that doesn't get talked about enough. The number of lives we lose as a country to roadway deaths is about the same as gun violence, with dramatically less attention, precisely because every single one of us knows people who are lost in roadway crashes. We, I think, have been brought up to think of it as normal. It's not, doesn't have to be. And so we've adopted a vision of zero. And if 0 roadway fatalities sounds pie in the sky, I'd invite you to consider the fact that 0 is the number of people who lost their lives in an airliner crash last year, and the year before that, and the year before that. If we can get 0 in a form of transportation that involves being propelled through the air by flammable liquids at nearly the speed of sound, I believe we can achieve it on the ground. But that, of course, means resources. So a lot of what we're funding that gets the most headlines are some of what I call the cathedrals of our infrastructure. The Brent Spence Bridge linking Ohio to Kentucky. The Hudson River Tunnel in New York will be one of the biggest public works projects east of the Mississippi in modern history. But we've also done hundreds of Safe Streets for All grants in communities, hopefully some of your communities, that are maybe not going to make national headlines and are in the millions rather than the billions or even the 6 figures. They include planning as well as construction, because we know that communities sometimes need help just getting these visions on the drawing board so that you can then get them off the drawing board and build them. But the bottom line is, with safer roads, as well as safer vehicles, safer speeds, higher standard of post-crash care, we have an opportunity to save so many lives. We are finally reversing the rise in roadway deaths. It's gone up a lot in the last few years. Last year, it went down by about between 3% and 4%. And again, let me relate that for perspective to aviation, where we are moving heaven and earth, rightly so, because a door plug blew out of an airplane and someone could have been hurt. We saved, as a country, somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 lives last year with that 3 or 4% reduction. So now let's do the other 96%. Let me just mention one other thing on safety, and we could talk safety all day, and happy to get into this more if it's of interest. But let's talk about railway safety, because that disproportionately affects rural communities as well. Many Americans, until the crash in East Palestine took place, were not aware that derailments are a daily occurrence in this country and always have been. Now, that doesn't mean they are all as dramatic or as terrifying as what that community in Ohio went through. But it does mean that there needs to be more done to keep communities that live along railway lines safe. That includes measures that we have undertaken, focused inspections, audits of railroad, the big Class 1 railroad companies, a higher standard of enforcement, rulemaking, including a rule. Believe it or not, up until a few weeks ago, there was no rule that said that a freight train that was 2 miles long had to have 2 people on it. We said, generally, you got to have at least 2 people on it. And the railroad lobbyists immediately, or the railroad corporations immediately sued us. So just to give you a sense of the landscape, which brings me to the other thing I want to mention, which is there is a Railway Safety Act waiting its turn in Congress right now. So you have my commitment that we're going to do everything we can do that does not require an act of Congress. But there are a few things that do require an act of Congress, and we are working right now with our friends on Capitol Hill to try to get that done, because I think rural communities can't wait for that peace of mind, knowing that this country has chosen to raise the bar on railroad safety as well.
Wow. Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Secretary. We're going to open up for questions. Over here. All right. Please, if you wouldn't mind.
And please begin by letting me know where you're from and
please.
what brought you here.
The infrastructure we care about, Mr. Secretary, are wharves. Working waterfront, humble structures that our fishermen and mariners depend on for their lives and livelihoods. These are mostly privately owned, not publicly owned. I know this, my organization owns one, Union Wharf in Portland, one of the oldest and biggest working waterfronts. We're extremely vulnerable, all of these working waterfronts, to climate change. We had devastating back-to-back storms in January that damaged and destroyed roughly half of our working waterfronts across the state of Maine. I'm curious if you can speak about what the department might have available, or what advice you have for how we help the owners of the wharves finance the reconstruction. So my organization is providing a lot of the scientific expertise to help owners rebuild them to be more climate resilient. The biggest challenge is how do hardworking people who own these wharves, they're often poorly or not even insured, how do they finance those upgrades?
Thanks. First of all, let me say I'm really excited and proud about some of the things we're doing in Maine, whether it's the airport work in Portland or Presque Isle, or whether it's Route 1 that we're finally able to get done. You know, Senator Collins and I have talked about this. I think there's a memorial to those who lost their lives in the industry that would be made less dangerous by shoring up some of that infrastructure along the coast. You know, wharves are in some ways like a lot of our infrastructure, the bulk of it, which is that most U.S. infrastructure is in private and or local hands, right? We don't actually own and operate most of it, with the exception of the national airspace. And even there, the airports aren't ours. So we're trying to be creative on how we can support those infrastructure owners as they face different kinds of risks, whether it's cyber attack risk or whether it's issues related to more frequent and extreme weather and rising sea levels. I don't want to get out of my depth, so I'll confess I don't know how all of the eligibilities would come into play here, but what I can tell you is that programs in our maritime administration, including our Port Infrastructure Development Program, and programs designed around resiliency, like one we have called Protect. This is one of the things in the Biden infrastructure package that's completely new, is about a $7 billion fund specifically for making our infrastructure more resilient. Because we can't go on, you know, if a road gets washed out or a berth appear. You know, the mode has been we just pay you to put it back exactly the way it was. Well, if it gets washed out again the next year, we got to start asking ourselves, are we doing this right? And, you know, back when I was mayor, we had a 1,000-year flood, and then we had our next one the next year. So we know that we need to be smarter about this. And that's what this program is about, saying, okay, maybe we put it back in a different fashion than how it was left to us. So we'd love to follow up and explore what eligibilities there might be for wharves and those kinds of facilities. But in particular, I want to emphasize when we talk about ports, yes, that can mean the Port of Long Beach and all the containers coming in at a massive facility like that. But some of those most gratifying and important projects we've done have been ports like Tell City, Indiana, where it's basically a floating crane. And we had the funding to just move it onto land, which meant they didn't have to worry about whether the Ohio River was too high or too low when they're getting the pig iron off the barges to take them up to a foundry that accounts for 1,000 jobs in a town of 7,000 people. That's just as exciting to me that we're getting the ball rolling on that funding as the $50 million grants we're doing to bring on-dock rail to the Port of Long Beach. So you're very much speaking our language when you talk about being more thoughtful about what infrastructure writ large means. And we'll follow up. I see Rafi's already approaching you with a card from my team to see a little more specifically whether some of the communities on the Maine seacoast that you have in mind might qualify.
All right, super. Gentleman back here.
Yes, thank you so much. And specifically, Mr. Secretary, we're a Rural Partnership Network in Mississippi, and our road safety plan through this Safe Streets for All is being developed right now. So thank you very much for that. I wanted to ask, this is kind of outside of the silo, it's in the private sector, but as we have this generational opportunity with all this funding that we're all hoping to put to amazing use, we're seeing that infrastructure costs are rising, I don't want to say to take advantage, but to take advantage of all this funding that's coming out. And that supply demand is really hurting some of these projects when we estimate their costs, we go through the procurement process, and by the time the shovel-ready project is ready to be done, we've exceeded our budget. So is there any conversations that are happening around trying to put that into a box?
Yeah, cost escalation is very much on our mind. And we know there are some things we can do about it. First of all, make the process quicker, right? If each passing day a project gets more expensive, try to have fewer days. And a lot of that is an engagement with our project sponsors where we compress the amount of time between when I make the phone call, congratulations, Yazoo's getting the grant, to when we actually get it signed off. That can take a year. It's normal for that to take a year. We're trying to speed that up. And that is a back and forth, right? We can't sign off that all the federal requirements are met until it's true. But we also shouldn't just throw the paperwork at you and say, call us when it's ready. And so I'm trying to adopt more of a culture in our department that even if there's an issue with the state or the county or whoever's running the project, we should consider that our problem to help navigate that. And that's what programs like Thriving Communities are all about, where we will even take philanthropic partners or our own technical assistance and use that to kind of move through the process quicker. And again, I'm just trying to make our process simpler to begin with so that it doesn't take as long. So that's one. Two, it sounds a little circular, but some of these projects will help with that. And what I mean by that is one of the biggest inflationary pressures we have in the country has to do with supply chains. So if we can unclog our supply chains, we can actually reduce some of the pinch points that make it more expensive than it should be to, for example, source the concrete or the steel that's going to go into an infrastructure project. And so some of our infrastructure projects will make it more affordable to build infrastructure projects in the long run. The third thing I would say is that the constraints on our supply side is not just supply chains, concrete and steel. More than anything, actually, it's the human side. And so we are investing very actively in the workforce side of things. We're testing the productive capacity of this country. And there's a huge opportunity in that because we're creating these great paying jobs. But it means we've really got to match the talent to the purpose, or it's going to take too long, cost too much, and we will miss a chance to create livelihoods for some people. One thing I would bring to your attention, knowing that many of you wear many hats in your communities and see things across the silos where in the federal org chart it doesn't quite work that way. Many of you touch infrastructure and education and workforce and labor. One thing you should know about is that sometimes transportation dollars can actually go to workforce. I was with the First Lady project in Pittsburgh. They're redoing the airport terminal there. They're actually able to use the construction dollars for on-site childcare at the construction site, knowing that a lot of working parents, including working women, can work on that job if and only if they have childcare. So it's the right thing to do for the families, but it's also the smart thing to do for the project. Not every state is taking advantage of this eligibility. The fact that federal aid formula highway dollars can go in certain ways to workforce purposes. So that's just one example of something we can unstick in a way that I think can help us with some of the constraints on supply that are pushing up costs. It's an all hands on deck effort to get costs in this country under control. And we think transportation is a big part of the solution, but we're going to have to be imaginative. And I really, again, because so many of you do so many things at once, I think rural leaders are especially well positioned to connect the dots. And then we want to be a good partner with you in getting that done.
Fantastic. We have time for one more question. I go there.
Good morning. I'm Tricia Purden. I'm the director for the Office of Rural Prosperity for the state of Kansas. One of the initiatives we rolled out was an executive safety committee that focused on Drive to Zero and a dashboard. And what it did was provide all of the rural communities across our state a drilled down viewpoint of the traffic accidents and fatalities they've experienced over the last 10 years, so that on a local level, communities can start tackling these challenges. You talked about some of the programs like Safe Routes to School and rail to trail crossings, and these are the issues that we're seeing on these communities. Are there opportunities to really drill down into that, knowing that so many states are going through their executive safety process to address some of these issues coming up?
Yes, thank you, totally. So first, this Safe Streets for All grant, actually by statute, a huge chunk of it has to go to the planning side. And so that can, under certain circumstances, I think help with developing these strategic plans as well as, again, I don't want to get out of my depth in terms of the exact eligibilities, but it can support these kinds of efforts. We're really trying to balance shovel-ready projects, which we want to get going on as quickly as possible, with shovel-worthy projects that might need a little more investment in planning and engineering. This is not the 2009 stimulus where it's just get that economic sugar into the bloodstream as quickly as possible. This is, as Mayor Benjamin said, an infrastructure decade. And so we're thinking about what can we do tomorrow and what can we fund just to get it in the works. We're also, though, taking as liberal an interpretation as the lawyers say is appropriate when it comes to what counts as planning. So some of you may be familiar with the concept of what's called tactical urbanism, sometimes putting out hay bales or paint to sketch out what a newly imagined streetscape would be like for a weekend and seeing how it goes, demonstrating something. That might qualify, again, check with a real lawyer, but sometimes that can qualify for these planning dollars too. So I would definitely encourage that. Second is to join some of the networks that we're creating. The Routes network, which is a body we've created within the DOT to try to help connect up some of these rural pieces. The rural and tribal technical assistance mechanisms that we've set up, because we may be able to do something more hands-on. Consider applying for Thriving Communities, which takes cohorts of communities, specifically looking for ones that maybe don't have a long track record of getting big federal grants, and connects you, importantly, to each other as well as to us to share best practices. And then we're going to try to provide dollars and just the moral support to get to zero, because I know that for a lot of people, it's so hard to imagine that you can almost lose somebody when you explain the goal of zero unless you kind of walk with them and explain that this is also national policy. Our U.S. National Roadway Strategy has, for the first time, adopted zero as our goal. One other thing I would say, look for success where you've found it. Part of how we can help people realize things like zero are possible is point to places that have done it. And I don't just mean places in Norway, although they've done incredible things. There are communities of 50,000 in the U.S., Edina, Minnesota, Evanston, Illinois, Jersey City, and Hoboken in New Jersey. These are communities of 30 to 50,000 people. What they have in common is they've gone at least 1 year with zero traffic fatalities. So find the places that are doing it so that it will encourage others to, instead of like, let's go after this impossible vision, it's let's join this cohort of communities that have achieved this and find out what they've done. A couple, I know I'm going over time, but you're touching on a favorite subject. A couple other things to mention. You mentioned the rail to trail piece, right? I think we have a real opportunity to make clear that that's a safety issue too. Because there's this idea that they're kind of ornamental, right? They're these nice thing to have, but they're like this frill. Why are you spending money on bike lanes when we should be doing, real infrastructure? Well, look, we're doing highways and bridges and railroads and all of that. But often it turns out to be the case that how you can get traction on the biggest category that's going the wrong way in roadway deaths, which is vulnerable road users, as in pedestrians and bicyclists, creating a separated path is often the right answer, or a bike lane, whatever it is, something to make it safer. And rural communities have been, I think, harmed by the old mentality that we've inherited, that the only reason a road would ever exist is to blast vehicles through it as quickly as possible. Speed efficiency matters, but we also need to make sure we have things set up in a way that human beings can kind of peacefully coexist with our own vehicles on these roadways. So take courage in knowing that there are a lot of communities that are getting great results. And then, of course, there's recreational benefit, there's economic development benefit. A lot goes with getting that right. I should probably stop there because there's so many other things that I'd love to get into, but I'm trying to behave myself. But I guess I'll end by just emphasizing again that as you pursue this work, we're here to be a good partner. And we know that our processes can be complicated, and we're working to break those down, make them more straightforward. And I guess the last thing I want to leave you with that I think is important, most of the power and the decisions, even in our especially in our federal programs, are closer to home. So what I mean by that is, for every dollar that you apply to the USDOT and we sit in a room and we do the yeses and nos and support as many as we can and we pick the winners, right? For every dollar that moves that way, there's like 10 that are going out through formulas, through the states, into the MPOs, into other bodies where it is easier to get a meeting than in Washington, D.C. Don't get me wrong, if you want a meeting, we'll do our best to welcome you to the USDOT. But often it's bodies that many of you are actually on, planning organizations, town councils, county organizations, state legislative processes where, unlike Congress, where you actually have to be invited in order to testify, like you can get in, right? So recognize that much of that decision is closer to home, but we'll do everything we can to give you some top cover in getting creative pro-safety visions and also, by the way, pro-transit visions through. We really believe in rural. You don't have to be Manhattan to benefit from transit. The last thing I want to leave you with is we are at 50, check me, I want to say 56,000 and counting. Every time I check, the number's higher. Last time I checked, I think it's 56,000 infrastructure projects funded through the Biden infrastructure package and counting that have been identified that are getting money and moving forward. What every one of those has in common is that it was not invented in the U.S. Department of Transportation headquarters in Washington, D.C. We don't think up any of the projects. We support them. Every project we're funding came to us or went to a state that's getting formula money. And so our whole philosophy here is that the answers aren't going to come from Washington, D.C., but more the funding should. And now it is. And that's what the infrastructure decade is all about. And it is by design set up to be as empowering as possible for local communities, solving the problems that you hear about from the people you serve. And we're going to do everything we can, again, at long last, not just with moral support, but with actual dollars to try to make that happen. Thanks.
Well, I often, my team will tell you, I tell people the two most powerful words in the English language are thank you. My wife, my very Southern wife, says they're actually yes, ma'am. I still think they're thank you. And first, we want to thank all of you for the amazing leadership that you're providing all across this great country. But how about y'all join me in thanking our Secretary Pete Buttigieg for joining us today. All right. So now I'll turn things over to USDA Deputy Undersecretary for Rural Development, Farah Ahmad.
All right, good morning, everyone. It still is morning, but we are rapidly headed towards the afternoon. We're about to hear from the last panel of the day. And I just want to start by saying how happy I am to be in this room. My name is Farah Ahmad. I'm the Deputy Undersecretary for Rural Development at the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And it really is the honor of my life to be in this role and to wake up every day with one purpose, and that is to serve rural America to the best of my ability. And that's why I was so thrilled to be in this room today with some of the most creative minds and innovative leaders across rural communities who we've been learning from over the last couple of years. You know, and even just seeing this sign up here, investing in rural America, is an important one. It's one that I think is truly reflective of the Biden administration's commitment to rural communities. You've seen it today in this room from Director Tandon, from the amazing Secretary Vilsack, Deputy Secretary Palm, and now Secretary Buttigieg. There's a reason that they're all in this room today, and that's because of you, and it's because of the commitment to delivering differently for rural communities. So today's panel is going to focus on our place-based work. So the Biden administration has had place-based initiatives as a cornerstone for how we're working differently with rural communities. In fact, the president made a commitment when he was running for this office to work with communities differently and to deliver differently. And so this is one important flagship way that we're doing that. Well, what is a place-based initiative? I think if we asked anyone in this room, we'd all kind of define it a little bit differently. To me, it means kind of 4 different things. One, it's federal government working better together. Yes, it's us working better together. It's USDA working better with EPA, working better with DOT. It's doing our homework together. And it's doing it together in service of rural communities. That's the second thing. And the third thing is it's us working better together to bring resources to rural communities that fit their vision first, not the other way around, right? For too long, I'm sure you've seen federal grants and you got to say, how do I fit the vision for this project in my town into these narrow boxes? What we're trying to do with the place-based work is flip that on its head and say, no, let's start with your community's vision first and see how we can fit our federal funding into that vision. So we can stack that funding in a way that actually makes that project go from an idea to something that actually breaks ground. For me, when I think about place-based initiatives, I oftentimes think of a metaphor of driving in a car. And that's because I've actually been in the car with many of you here today, driving through your community. And you're in the driver's seat, right? And the federal government, we're in the passenger seat. You've set the destination, and it's our job to help you navigate around the potholes, get to the gas station when you need it, but ultimately get you to where you want to go and where your community wants to go. And so ultimately, that's what our place-based work is about. It's about being more accessible. It's about having one front door, one easy front door to federal government, not you knocking on the door of every single different agency to get an answer. It's for us to wear an all-of-government hat, not our agency-specific hats. And when you need it, to make one phone call and get the answer that you need from many agencies, and for us to do that work on the back end. And I think this work is really reflective of something the president did on the first day in office. He signed an executive order on equity and racial justice. And in that executive order, it actually said rural communities in there. Rural communities are part of our equity agenda here, and for too long, they've been left behind. And closing those gaps deeply matter to this president and this administration. So today, we're going to hear from many panelists who have taken a leap of faith in working with us as the federal government as we try to do this, this place-based work in partnership with you. Many of the folks you're going to hear today have joined 2 of the place-based initiatives of many that we have. One is the Rural Partners Network that we've heard about throughout the day, and the other is the Interagency Working Group on Coal and Energy Communities. Oh man, we like to use so many words in federal government. But we'll be talking about why they decided to take the leap of faith with us today and what's been going on and some of the successes. So with that, I will turn it over to my panelists. So let's get started. All right. I'm going to do the intros a little bit different today. I didn't tell you ahead of time, so this will be a surprise question. I'll say it slowly so you can think about the answer. So I want folks to know who you are, but you've all got incredible bios. But maybe we can do our introductions by kind of sharing who you are, where you're from, and what is your happy place. And by that I mean a happy place in your community or a happy place or joy that you find in doing the work that you do as leaders in your community. So why don't we go ahead and start here, Mr. Mayor?
Good afternoon. How you all doing? My name is Mayor Eric Simmons. I'm mayor of Greenville, Mississippi. It's a city with a population of about 29,000 folks. To give you some socioeconomic indicators, Mississippi, Greenville lags behind Mississippi and the country when it comes to median household income. The median household income is about $34,000, and the Mississippi is $49,000, where the country it is $64,000. SNAP benefits, the national average is about 11%. Folks in Greenville, Mississippi receive about 23% SNAP benefits. So it has a population, a consistent poverty of about 30%. And so for me, the happy place is that thank you and that smile that you see when you are doing service in your community, impacting the lives of folks in your community. For me, it's really the smile and that thank you of the face of a 6-year-old who is now growing community gardens in an elementary school, and they're pulling a cabbage out because now they know that they can grow their own food, and we know if a child is hungry, they can't learn. That smile and that thank you that I get when I see an elderly man who's 70 years old who calls to say, the walking trail that we just put in, his A1C numbers are down because the poverty and the historic health disparities that we have in the Mississippi Delta. Or that woman who has an SSI check who says now that sewer is no longer going in her home because we've done a sewer project by and through the Biden-Harris administration. So for me, that happy place is that thank you. It's that smile, whether it's workforce development, the returning citizen who's now working for the city of Greenville who made a mistake. And that grandmother says, thank you for hiring my son who now made a mistake, but now he is working in the city of Greenville and has received his first check. And so when you think about that thank you, and you think about that smile in rural America, I think about the number of muscles that it take to make a smile and for a person to say thank you. And I can sincerely say on behalf of the folks of Greenville and others in rural America now, scientists can add the Biden and Harris administration as that new muscle that is creating that thank you and that smile in rural America and the faces of the people that we impact every day by these historic investments. So thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you for your service. Gary.
I'm Gary Magrino. I'm from the Cocopa Indian tribe. I'm not a tribal member. I'm an employee of the tribe. Been there 9 years. We're located in a little town called Somerton, Arizona, which is 7 miles south of Yuma. And if you go south from our west reservation, you better have a Mexican passport because that's where the border is. If you go west from our reservation, keep your Mexican passport because Mexico's over there too. If you remember your geography, that little jog on the corner, that's where we are. Small tribe, 1,200, very proud, very self-sufficient. We want to take care of ourselves, take care of our people. What makes me happy? We have a young person just graduated from college and got their degree, big time, very good. He's also going to be a lieutenant in the Army National Guard. That really makes us feel well. So when I first went to work there, I was asked, we need to do something. We have the traditional casino, hotel, gas convenience store. I think most of the Western tribes have that. I don't know if we have it up in the North the same way. But it's based on a service economy. And what we have to do is change our economy. Now, how do you change your economy when you're an Indian tribe, when you have poverty and you have everything else that's going on? Our savior came with a Rural Partners Network. I can guarantee it. Mr. Jones over here, he once said to me, he said, finding out about the federal government and information is like drinking out of a fire hose. And I consider that's the truth. And the other thing is when you go to college as an undergraduate, you don't know where the library is, you don't know where to go, don't know anything. In fact, we don't have a department for grant writing, don't have a grant writer. And my big problem was I had to ask, what's a NOFO? I had to learn that one from there on. Because of this, we were able to change some of our views and actually we're going to go into a production type economy. But like the old saying says, for the lack of a nail, we lost a horseshoe. Well, electricity on a reservation is good for homeowners. It won't attract any energy. Any big companies won't help us. We need good electricity. We live in the sunniest place on earth. 362 days of sunshine is in Yuma, Arizona. So what we do? We said, let's put in a solar plant. How do we get the help? RPN, they guided us. We were able to get it was a $5 million grant from the Department of Energy to install this. And once we get that in, our next step will be bringing in other industries, such as cattle processing, beef industry, and we're looking at a possibility of making hydrogen out of water. So it's an exciting time, and I really want to say that the RPN is the one that helped guide us through. There's nothing left.
Thank you, Gary. Appreciate that. Jen.
I'll make mine pretty true to the question here. I appreciate this thoughtful question. You know, my maternal grandparents were Polish immigrants who ran a dairy farm in southwestern PA, and similar to what Senator Stabenow said this morning, those are hardworking lifestyles, but that was one of my happiest places I could possibly be a kid in. And it was very formative for me. In my adult years, I lived for over a decade in West Virginia, had my kids there, and their experience was in West Virginia, which was a lot of driving back roads and deep mountain communities and some of the most beautiful scenery. And the John Denver song, Country Roads, speaks to people around the world for a reason. There's just a happy, joyful, special feeling that comes from the kind of country back road life. So those are happy places for me. And I spent a lot of time with my husband's family in northern Ontario in the Bay of Islands, where it's very remote, very, very rural, and also unbelievable scenery where nature is just like in your face at all times. And it's a lucky place to spend the summers too.
Thanks, Jen. And if you don't mind, at the end, we'd love for you to close us out with a rendition of Country Roads, if you don't mind.
No, you really don't.
Jacob, go ahead.
I'd pay money to see that. My name's Jacob Hanna. I'm a fifth-generation West Virginian. I have 3 generations of coal mining in my family. I'll get to the destination, but first a little context of my happy place and where I want to get to. I've seen my dad laid off from the mines when they were shut down. I have to write down because I'm a little nervous around suit and tie events, if you can't tell. I've seen the labor participation rate drop well below the national average in my community. I've seen the decay of once beautiful communities I've grown up in. I've seen my home burn down to the ground because of a lack of civic infrastructure. I've seen friends succumb to the opioid epidemic. I've read the numbers of my city in headlines: highest exodus rate, highest overdose rate, highest joblessness rate. I have seen glimmers of hope in Appalachia. My papaw was employed through FDR's CCC program, the New Deal. My dad, his son, was employed through LBJ's investment on the war on poverty in Appalachia. Those were great initiatives, but they didn't really keep the dollars in our region because there wasn't capacity. It was the funding, which was awesome and always needed, but the capacity piece was missing. Here I am finding myself in another, you've heard it a lot today, generational season of investment and funding. No pressure. Make it work, make sure it sticks, and don't repeat the 2 generations of funding that sort of was awesome for the season but then moved on. And so with these same eyes that I have that has sort of witnessed death in slow motion in my communities, today I can tell you I have now seen my hands pull the switch to flip on the largest nonprofit solar array in my state. I have seen us build back folks in the coal-impacted communities that install those solar arrays through local union-paying jobs. I've seen our workforce development model remove barriers to employment for 800 Appalachians, many of whom are emerging from recovery and into the workforce. Where I once saw a struggling mono economy, of coal being the only employer in town. I've seen our model incubate up to 72 new social enterprises in sustainable, diverse sectors. I have seen 3,000 Appalachians trained in new sectors like sustainable light manufacturing and agriculture. I'm passionate about this, folks, I'm sorry. Carpentry, upcycling, renewable energy, words that I'm still learning the definition of. Even coal mine reclamation and restoration, which is really cool. There's 800,000 acres of coal mines that need restored. And I've seen us answer the call to build that real local capacity. We're actually building it, and now we're ready. And so through help like partners that you see on this stage, we've built a coalition, the Appalachian Climate Technologies Coalition, because this is bigger than our nonprofit. It's bigger than this generation even. You've heard it, it's decades long. So how can we build up the capacity to make that last? So we were able to pull down a $62 million EDA grant to invest in West Virginia and its communities that will create 6,000 new paying jobs, 380 businesses, and hundreds of thousands of square feet of buildings revitalized in coal communities. But there's so much work that still needs to be done. In order to attain parity with the nation, we have to create over 100,000 new jobs just in the 21-something counties of West Virginia. So the work is huge. That's why we're not stopping now. Through this coalition, working with the Interagency Working Group, we've been able to use that initial funding to leverage $800 million more for Appalachia. Some of that is going directly to put solar on top of coal mine lands, which is freaking awesome. And another is $500 million to develop a green bank to fund initiatives beyond just the life cycle of the grants. Make sure there's still opportunities beyond this season. And why is this different than the previous two generations? And this is sort of getting to my happy place. Sorry, it's a long-winded answer. Here's what it ain't. It ain't just throwing money at the problem. It's a holistically placed solution that puts funding directly into local people's hands to make tangible, long-lasting solutions in their communities. It ain't just political talk either. It's about creating real jobs in real places that need the opportunities real bad with resources that serve us the best. And it ain't about pitting coal miners against solar installers. I'll always be proud of my family's generational heritage of producing energy for the nation. The mines may have shut down before I could enter them, but coal was just sunlight trapped in soil for 1 billion years, so I get to just cut out the middleman of 1 billion years and mine the sun. So that's pretty cool. And lastly, what it ain't is the last time you'll hear about Appalachia and good work. We're trying to transform ourselves from a region of extraction to a producer of hope. And so thank you for believing in us as we learn to believe in ourselves again. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. And to quote you on stage, that was freaking awesome. So, but it's not always easy to work with the federal government, right? This is a little bit of best practices combined with an experiment. And place-based work, honestly, it's more of an art than a science. And so I'd love to start with you, Mr. Mayor, and kind of help us understand, when you signed up for World Partners Network, what did you think you were signing up for, and what did you actually get?
I want to say it's ironic that we are here at the White House getting ready to celebrate 70 years of Brown versus Board of Education this week, where 9 justices said separate but equal is inherently unequal. And so for me, with the Rural Partners Network, when we talk about equity and talk about leveling the playing field for rural America, I'm the mayor of Greenville, Mississippi, but most mayors in Mississippi, for the most part, in rural America, they come to work twice a month, and that's for their board meetings. So they don't have the capacity to apply for these large-scale funding vehicles, yet alone they don't even have engineers. They get paid $50 a month just to come to work, and so they really working another job for benefits. And so they deserve these large-scale funding vehicles as well. They deserve these federal dollars to impact the lives of the folks that they represent as well. And so for me, Rural Partners Network was that promise, if you will, to make sure that we're maximizing those federal resources with the local visions of communities. And so it was launched, ironically, in the Mississippi Delta, and I got to just give shout out to my Congressman Benedict Thompson, and Secretary, thank you, please, thank you. And Secretary Vilsack, who came to the Mississippi Delta to lunch with Lee Jones and Dr. Corey Wiggins, who is here, and Dr. Trina George, who launched the Rural Partners Network to make sure that we understood right there in the Mississippi Delta that the federal government is there for us, but it hears us as well. And so we have a signature project, the aviation project at our airport that is doing regional economic development, buy-in through a maintenance, repair, overhaul. We've braided funding resources. And to me, the got you moment was announcement with DRA making a $2.5 million project that's going to create 200 jobs in the Mississippi Delta. That $2.5 million came from EDA, but USDA was there in the room making the announcement. So now this Rural Partners Network is a whole of government approach where these agencies are now working together to create economic opportunities in the Mississippi Delta. We braided funding in the state. My identical twin brother is the Senate Minority Leader of the Mississippi State Senate. He matched that with about $1.5 million for our airport. The Greenville City Council did $11 million general obligation bond. So it's a multi-million-dollar project that was inspired by and through the Rural Partners Network that's going to create 200 jobs. So when you talk about getting rid of persistent poverty, when you talk about making sure that children can grow their own food, when you talk about making sure your health disparities go down, you do that by and through what Secretary Vilsack said, economic opportunity. The Rural Partners Network is doing that for the Mississippi Delta, and I want to say thank you, Lee, but thank you to the Biden-Harris administration for the work they continue to do in making these historic investments in communities like the Mississippi Delta.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's, I'm going to hop around a little bit here. I think that's a true success story that we're trying to achieve in all the places we're focused on. The braiding of funding, I loved that analogy, right? Not any one agency can solve it all, but together we can make a higher impact. But it's not just the federal government. We need other partners too. It's kind of in the name, right? Rural Partners Network. We need state government, local government, nonprofits, and philanthropy. So Jen, I want to turn it to you for a second. You're representing philanthropy on this panel. And you know, sometimes the government and philanthropy tend to work in parallel lanes and not always together. And so when I think about braiding funding, I'm sort of curious, what brought you to the table in wanting to join this effort and work in a collaborative public-private partnership type way?
Yes, I really appreciate you adding philanthropy to this event because I do think we are kind of quiet partners that people don't always recognize that we're at the table. The Benedum Foundation turns 80 this year. We are a place-based funder, and this, the work that's being done by all of you is core to the philosophy of where we're putting our money. But we are often an unseen partner in most ways. Secretary Buttigieg mentioned the Pittsburgh Airport project in his remarks and the child care center that was being added to this $1 trillion infrastructure project. The Benedum Foundation helped fund that child care center. Why? Because more people can work and take care of their kids, and quality child care can be provided for the thousands, tens of thousands of people that are working at the Pittsburgh Airport, many of whom are driving from West Virginia. So our region is southwestern Pennsylvania and all of West Virginia. We are a very tight geography as a place-based funder. And what we, let me just say, 80 years ago, philanthropy looked like straight charity, I would say. But today, the philanthropic world, I believe, for the peers that I work with, see ourselves as partners. We see ourselves as conveners. We see ourselves as thought leaders. We see ourselves as emergency support for some of our nonprofits that we know are really doing the important work. So, like Secretary Buttigieg said, the solutions are going to come from the ground. The federal government should be funding it. Who makes that match up? It's often philanthropy because it's, as you kicked off our question, it's hard to work with the federal government. It just is. The applications, the audits, the grant writers, the mobilization within the community, it is really hard. And when you're dealing in communities or nonprofits that have had low resource, disinvestment, very few staff wearing a lot of hats like Jacob here, Like to put these projects together is difficult. So what the Benetton Foundation started to do about 20 years ago was to work on capacity. And that looked like helping with grant writing, helping with audits, helping with visioning, helping with finding the nonprofits that we knew were filling a gap that was really essential. Coalfields is filling an incredibly innovative approach to workforce. We have others in health, others in education. We find them, we try to scale them, we try to build what capacity they need. And from that, they apply for more federal grants and get them. Then they apply for bigger federal grants and they get them. And they apply for bigger federal grants and they get them. And pretty soon they apply for Build Back Better at $62 million and they get it.
That's right.
What we know they don't have is some of the technical support to get it started, and we know they really struggle with matching dollars for the federal grants. I had my staff print out just the past few years the grants that we have money in that are associated with federal agencies. EDA, USDA, ARC, on and on. I couldn't believe it was 5 pages just from this administration. Why? Because this administration doesn't look like any of our past administrations. It is up funding, it's being intentional, it's being supportive in a capacity way, and it is providing the real money that we need to flip the narrative and to get the money to get stickier and the projects to get bigger in rural America. So it is the bipartisan infrastructure law. It is the Inflation Reduction Act. It is the upfunding of the Appalachian Regional Commission. They've added 3 new programs, hundreds of millions of dollars, and it's the Interagency Working Group on Coal-Impacted Communities. It is the support to convene, to take all those resources and make them translatable, to be out in the field. Brian Anderson, I see him everywhere because he's out with his team. He's out with his team say, did you apply for this grant? Let me help you with that grant. Did you look at this? And it's making a difference. It's landing.
Jen, I'm a Mississippi Delta boy, and I think about what you said as a peanut and butter jelly sandwich. And so you can't have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich without the bottom layer bread, which is the technical assistance that we're seeing with the Biden-Harris administration, but also the top layer. You got to have the bread to make it. And I think the Biden-Harris administration is making sure everybody got a peanut butter and jelly sandwich in their communities right now. So thank y'all.
I love that. And I'm the only thing standing between you and peanut butter jelly sandwiches in about a minute here. And unfortunately, we are getting short on time, and we've heard so much great stuff. I'm going to ask our panelists to close us out with anything they'd like. We had a lot of discussion on capacity. I wish we had more time to talk about that. I know we've got great stories from Gary and Jacob on that. But if you could just share with the audience, in working in with a place-based initiative, interagency working group on energy communities or World Partners Network, have you had, like an aha moment that you've encountered so far that's like, I just learned something that I didn't know I could do before? Or what's a piece of practical advice you can share with folks in the room? Because I want us to walk away with something. There's so much rich information here. So I'd love to just hear your aha moment or your practical advice for your fellow leaders in the room. And Gary, I'll start with you.
Well, I don't want to slow everybody for lunch, but I would like to say that we thought of the federal government as just say no at our level. We were down the pipe so far. It's a big funnel, little spout, hits us on our head. We signed up with the RPN, and Christine has helped us immensely, and they held our hand and got us through this. So if you haven't participated, please do. And if you can gather any support to your congressmen and senators, tell them this needs to be funded further on. Thank you.
I'll echo that. A few years ago, the largest one-off grant that we'd gotten was $2 million. And so our staffing size was structured accordingly to that. And so when you see these massive funding opportunities that are centered right towards your regions and your communities, and it would be a travesty if it passed by and wasn't pulled down, you're faced with 2 options. Either bet it all that you're going to get that grant and triple the size of your organization, or really look left and right and pull in your partnerships to say, hey, we may disagree on some things, we may have different priorities, but we can all agree jobs are good for our communities, and this is how we will create a roadmap to come together and make a coalition to pull it down together to where there isn't a cliff at the end of that grant where you have to lay off 2/3 of your organization when it expires. You can make it functional and sustainable, and it's not all on you as one organization. Like, we're one nonprofit serving 21 counties. There should be 21 nonprofits and 21 organizations serving 21 counties, and that's what we're trying to build and replicate.
Thanks, Jacob. Jen, over to you. Advice for the group.
I'll just say opportunity and talent should combine anywhere and everywhere, and we need to keep that in mind.
And I would just close by saying educate, engage, and execute. And I think the Rural Partners Network is in educating these small communities about the number of funding opportunities that are out there, but also engage not only at the multi-level, whether it's local, state, and federal, but also multi-state as well. I'm a co-chair of a group of mayors, 105 mayors on the Mississippi River Basin, called Mississippi River Cities and Towns Initiative. And we're looking at how we can deploy 100,000 acres of nature-based infrastructure right there on the Mississippi River Basin. And we're doing it by and through the USDA Conservation Regional Program, and also the PROTECT program that Secretary Buttigieg has talked about to deploy these resources. And so work multi-state, multi-level, but also execute your plan when you get educated and you engage strategically across all levels of government, but also with philanthropic organizations and also the private industry as well. So thank you all so much.
Thank you. And I just want to say thank you to our panelists for taking a leap of faith with us, letting us get in the passenger seat with you. And thank you so much for your leadership.
Thank you for your help.
Excellent. Thank you so much. What an excellent panel. So great to hear about all the incredible work through the Rural Partners Network, the Interagency Working Group on Coal and Power Plant Communities. And now I want to turn it to our final speaker. Very excited to be joined by true champion for rural America, someone who really leads our rural work through the U.S. Department of Agriculture, our Undersecretary for Rural Development, Dr. Basil Gooden, to close us out.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I will certainly be brief, but I just wanted to take a few moments just to first thank everyone for being here. Thank you for the tremendous work that you're doing in your communities. This is a wonderful day for rural America. And what I like to say at USDA Rural Development, this is a great day for country folks. And I say that because it's not every day that you have two cabinet secretaries come and talk to a group about the investments of this administration in rural America. It's not every day that you get to spend time in the same room with two cabinet secretaries or the director of the Domestic Policy Council that came and spoke to us as well. What we heard throughout today actually was historic investments that are being made in rural America. This is, I feel, a once-in-a-lifetime investment, generational investment that's being made by the Biden-Harris administration in rural America. And I'm so excited because as the leader of USDA Rural Development, that's what we do. We work with you all in the space of rural America to improve the health and well-being of rural America across the country. I share this story very briefly with you about rural America. I am a beef cattle farmer from Virginia, Central Virginia, Buckingham County, Virginia. And I share this story to reflect really, I think, the essence of rural America. Back in 2018, July 25th, I got a phone call around 11 p.m. from the Sheriff's Department in Buckingham County, Virginia. I live about 45 minutes from my farm, beef cattle farm, and got a phone call around 11 p.m. and said, hey, there's been a car accident in front of your farm. And the passenger of the car is okay, but there's gaping holes in your fence line. And please come up here and fix that fence line before we have a road full of cattle. And so I jumped out of bed, and actually I sped up to Buckingham County, Virginia, and got there, less than an hour, about 45 minutes or so. But by the time I got there, my yard and the road was actually full of people from the community, people that I have Some people I knew, some people I didn't know. There were black people, there were white people, people of different religions, people of different political persuasions than me. They had already come and they had already fixed that fence line there in Buckingham County, Virginia. That right there is the essence for me of rural America. People coming together, working, regardless of whether they knew me or not. They saw a neighbor in need, and they came and they provided services. That's what I see in this room here. I see people working together. We're here at USDA Rural Development to work alongside you, to work with you to complete the great work that you're doing in your communities across America. In rural areas, tribal communities, Colonias, Appalachia, the Black Belt, tremendous work that's being done. Hopefully the takeaway message that you have today is that this administration, the Biden-Harris administration, is investing heavily with finances and resources, whether it's through the Rural Partners Network that you heard a lot about earlier today. This administration is investing heavily in rural America. We're taking our obligation seriously to do the great work in rural America, to work alongside of you. And I'm just so honored that Senator Stabenow actually joined us today too. It is amazing, the unveiling of the Farm Bill, as she indicated earlier today, making historic investments in not only farming, and again, as she indicated, the version of the Farm Bill will certainly keep farmers farming, families fed, and rural communities strong. That's what that version of the Farm Bill really, really pushes. And we're excited about that opportunity. It really focuses on rural health, childcare, and things that you know that we need in rural America. So again, I want to thank the senator and her team for unveiling that version of the Farm Bill. And we're excited about the impact that that version will certainly make. But also, in closing, just wanted to reiterate the remarks of the Secretary. The Secretary is just, Secretary Vilsack, tremendous work, tremendous visionary, someone that's dedicated day in and day out to rural America and to agriculture and to the strength of the country as well. But again, just a little bit about the investments that were announced today. Certainly $118 million in water and wastewater loan projects across the United States. Tremendous, tremendous investment. $552 million, certainly in electric infrastructure loan and loan guarantee programs. And then also the announcement about the disaster assistance funding in Puerto Rico. Again, that's $1 million. And actually, the award amounts will actually vary because we're looking at doing about 4 awards there in Puerto Rico under the leadership of State Director Maximilian Trullo, actually doing a tremendous job, he and his team. Again, $250,000 for 4 awardees. Again, the window to apply for those funds opened today, and it actually closes on actually June the 28th. So again, for entities in Rural Partner Network areas in Puerto Rico, please take advantage of that opportunity. And then finally, please, please consider nominating someone for the Rural Innovators recognition. Actually, you can go on rural.gov and make that nomination, because what we know here is that there's a lot of innovation going on in rural America. There's a lot of great work that's going on in rural America. And we want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts for your role in the work that's being done across the country in rural America. And please know that we're here as partners at USDA Rural Development. It just did my heart great to hear the wonderful stories about how rural development has touched so many communities, whether it's through housing or infrastructure projects or broadband. or other projects as well. Because again, we know that the work we do changes lives and transforms communities. So again, thank you so much for this tremendous opportunity. Thank you for being here today and the work that you do across the country. It makes a difference in the lives of so many people in America today. Thank you so much. I'll turn it back over to Will. Will, back to you.
What a great to end this. Thank you so much, Undersecretary Gooden, for your leadership and for being with us here today. And thank you all for joining us. It's so incredible to have so many rural community leaders here in one place. And we really appreciate you all taking the time out of your busy schedules to come join us here today. I'm just going to end with a little housekeeping here. So Undersecretary Gooden just mentioned the Rural Innovators Program. Please do visit rural.gov. Please do share that nomination form with your networks. We'll share the White House fact sheet that went out this morning with information on that program, as well as a roll-up of all of the historic investments this administration is making in rural communities across the country. Please share that fact sheet. Please share the Rural Innovators Program with your networks as far as and wide as possible. And please continue to share with us the success stories and the challenges that you have from your communities so that we can help to especially lift up those success stories and to help address those challenges, create opportunities for your communities. So thank you again. Just a little housekeeping. We're going to have staff that can help guide folks towards the exits. So Gina and folks along the wall here can help guide folks downstairs. For those, I know we have some folks that are going to be here for an afternoon session with the Rural Partners Network, Community Network. So if you're here with that group, we have just a little bit of time. Need to be back at the gate at 17th and State Place by 1:15 to get back through security if you plan to leave campus to get lunch. If you'd like to stay on campus, we've got a cafeteria down on the ground level called Ike's. It's Taco Tuesday, so if anybody's interested in that, it's pretty good. And but just make sure we'll be back in this room for that meeting at 1:30. So if you do leave campus, please just make sure you get back by 1:15. And then for everybody, everyone is welcome to join us. Thanks again to the National Cooperative Business Association. We're hosting who's hosting a reception for guests here at this event over at their office. Email the address is in the email that was sent last night. That's from 3:30 to 5 o'clock. So we hope to be able to continue this conversation, continue to network over there later this afternoon. So with that, thank you all again for joining us. Feel free to head out that direction, and we'll have staff that'll help guide you towards the exits. Thank you so much.